This fellow whose Tao name is Nether Enlightenment is indeed an extremely formidable sword immortal, since he was able to attain a grand Tao of the sword. Jiyu picked up the note and viewed it for a short moment, then he shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, he only overcame 8 of the 9 levels of heavenly tribulation. He was only a step away from ascending into the ranks of heavenly immortals. If you carefully consider it, this fellow, Nether Enlightenment, can only be considered to be a formidable fallen sword immortal. Fallen immortal? Xianxia extremely shocked inwardly. Even a fallen immortal was a terrifying existence that was currently difficult for him to reach. Poof! The yellowish note that was written with blood-red cinnabar suddenly lit ablaze within Jiyu's hand and transformed into ash that scattered into the air. Why did you destroy it? Xianxia asked in astonishment. Every word on this note was filled with dense and mighty sword insight. Observing and understanding it would be extremely beneficial to cultivating sword techniques. Jiyu had his hands behind his back as he said indifferently, "A sword Tao that can't even withstand the heavenly tribulation is not worth learning." She still felt it was a pity and said in a daze, "But I can learn from his strong points to overcome my own weak points. You have to remember that the most important thing on the path of sword cultivation is to possess a pure heart towards the sword that's firm and tenacious." This note was left behind by him when he was obsessed to the point it became an inner demon. His aura is irritable and in disorder, and the sword Tao atop the note is extremely disorderly. Using it to learn and train would only destroy the path of your sword Tao. Jiyu said emotionally, "One day, if you're able to pass the 13th level of the Heaven Peak of Trials, and see the unparalleled sword insight left behind by that peerless sword immortal when he tried to get through the Heaven Peak of Trials, you'll understand what the true path of a sword cultivator is. No matter how formidable he was, didn't he still die there? When he first met Jiyu, she had once heard Jiyu mention that during this 1 million years, for the sake of obtaining the inheritance left by Jiyu's master, countless formidable cultivators had once challenged the Heaven Peak of Trials. Moreover, amongst them, the most formidable was a peerless sword immortal from hundreds of thousands of years ago. But the sword immortal had merely passed the 13th level of the Heaven Peak of Trials before meeting his end. Jiyu shook his head, then sighed. It isn't the same, it isn't the same. The note had already turned to ash, so saying any more was of no use. She quickly placed his attention onto the surroundings, and as he looked at the empty room, he couldn't help but ask, "Senior Jiyu, this is really the sword immortal's abode? If my inference isn't mistaken, then this is the main hall that the immortal Nether Enlightenment stayed in." Jiyu's gaze swept the surroundings, and he suddenly stretched out his hand to point at the jade bed. "Sit on it and circulate your true essence." A flash of wisdom appeared in Xianxia's mind when he heard this, and said, "This jade bed wouldn't be the control center of the entire sword immortal's abode, right?" "Exactly. But with your current strength, you're still unable to bind this immortal estate. You can only rely on it to observe the entire immortal estate." As the spirit of the manor that had lived for 1,000,000 years, Jiyu obviously knew all of this like the back of his hand, and casually said, "If you want to obtain some valuable treasures, then you should quickly figure out the distribution of this immortal estate. Take action swiftly. You're already later than those people by 3 days after all." Xianxia naturally didn't dare dally. When he sat on the jade bed, he felt a cool and refreshing stream of air suffuse into his entire body, causing his mind to be unable to refrain from becoming calm. Obviously, this jade bed had a marvelous effect towards cultivating as well. As soon as he circulated his true essence, she felt his mind chime, and a lifelike image suddenly appeared before his eyes. On the top of the image were labels that said Book Reserve Hall, Treasure Hall, etc. Shockingly, it was the layout map of this immortal estate. She viewed them one by one and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. It turned out that this sword immortal's estate was extremely enormous, covering an area of about 500 kilometers. The outer area of the estate was 8 winding passageways that were long and narrow, and they were respectively named as Fortune, Misfortune, Compliment, Slander, Praise, Ridicule, Pain, and Joy. implying the truth behind the 8 things that can move a person's heart. A terrifying triple golden arc sword formation was concealed within the Fortune passageway. Countless demonic souls roamed about the Misfortune passageway. Black flame lava from the core of the land flowed like a large river within the Slander passageway. Regardless of which passageway, terrifying killing intent was concealed within all of them. Xianxia shuddered with fear as he saw this and said inwardly, "If I were to enter the estate through these 8 passageways with my current cultivation, I'm afraid it would basically be courting death." The end of the 8 passageways was the core area of the estate, and it was once again divided into 4 areas which were respectively the Book Reserve Hall, Treasure Hall, 100 Herb Hall, and Martial Dao Hall. At the center of these 4 great halls was the main hall that Xianxia currently resided in, and it was also the control center of the entire estate. Within these 4 secondary halls, various chambers were densely distributed like an ant hill, and what treasure was stored within was unknown. However, Xianxia was elated that the main hall he resided in just happened to be able to lead directly to these 4 secondary halls, and the way was without booby traps. "Senior Gu, do you think I should go to the Treasure Hall or Book Reserve Hall first?" Xianxia was slightly hesitant. Just as its name implied, the Treasure Hall surely contained the various magic treasures and weapons left behind by the Immortal, Nether Enlightenment, whereas the Book Reserve Hall naturally contained various cultivation techniques. These 2 categories of things obviously possessed equally great temptation to a cultivator. As for the 100 Herb Hall that cultivated treasures of heaven and earth, its temptation was equally great. But to Xianxia, its attractiveness was far inferior to the Treasure Hall and Book Reserve Hall. Whereas the Martial Dao Hall would presumably be the place the Immortal, Nether Enlightenment, trained his martial techniques, and its attractiveness to Xianxia wasn't great. Before Gu could even speak, Xianxia suddenly noticed that there were shockingly 10+ white halos moving on the map and had already left the praise passageway. The white halos ought to represent the cultivators that have entered the estate so that the Immortal, Nether Enlightenment, would be able to control everything from here. Xianxia pondered inwardly for a short moment before his heart shook as he realized a trace of something wrong. There are only 8 people in Chai Lishan's group, so these white halos ought to be Su Jiao's group, and looking at the direction they are heading, it's precisely the Treasure Hall. This won't do. I absolutely can't allow them to benefit. Whoosh! Xianxia stood up and charged out without hesitation. "What have you found?" Gu floated in the air as he followed Xianxia. He didn't look at the map but was able to discern that Xianxia's expression was off. "Someone is entering the Treasure Hall soon," Xianxia replied as he dashed rapidly. "That little Su clan girl?" "Yes. Oh, we'll completely clean out the Treasure Hall and cause her to be unable to obtain a single treasure. It's indeed an extremely happy thing." "Xianxia, I support you in doing this." Xianxia was stunned. "I never imagined that such a cool figure like Senior Gu would have the lofty sentiments of hating injustice like poison." In next to no time, the 2 of them went along the side door to rush into the Treasure Hall. So many secret chambers? Xianxia's head couldn't help but ache at the moment he entered the Treasure Hall and gazed at the zigzag corridor that was filled with chambers. If he were to search them one by one, he didn't know how long it would take before he was able to find the true location that the treasures were hidden in. "Follow me." Gu's gaze swept the surroundings, and he was silent for a moment before floating along the corridor to head deep into the Treasure Hall. "Looks like I got worried for nothing. With Senior Gu here, why should I worry about being unable to find those treasures?" Xianxia was extremely elated in his heart as he followed Gu. Bang! 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 Not long after Xianxia's figure had vanished deep within the corridor, the main door of the Treasure Hall that had been sealed for 10,000 years was opened. "This is the Treasure Hall?" As she felt the pure and thick spirit energy that flowed in the air and gazed at the numerous chambers that densely covered and extended into the depths of the Treasure Hall, Su Jiao couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, and her eyes were filled with burning desire. "Ha ha! Our luck is too good indeed." Songbin laughed loudly with an expression that was extremely elated. "I heard that immortal estates are divided into various great halls, but in terms of the most valuable, it was undoubtedly the Treasure Hall that stored various treasures. Everyone, we have no time to lose. Since so many chambers exist here, we can only split up. As for whether we're able to find any treasures, it will be up to our own fate. Su Jiao said with an excited tone. Haha, precisely. If your luck has arrived, then you might be able to obtain an immortal treasure. Song Bin was extremely excited as well. Then let's split up. Okay. This suggestion isn't bad. There are so many treasures, and if we rely on our own fate, then the problem of dividing the treasures wouldn't exist. It couldn't be better. The other people spoke out in approval. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. All of them swiftly dispersed and dashed towards the chambers in various places within Treasure Hall. They dashed forward for the time an incense stick took to burn before Jiyu abruptly stopped, his gaze shooting towards the nearby chamber that seemed ordinary. No wonder. So the door is actually suffused with a trace of the aura of chaotic life soil. A rare trace of surprise was emitted from Ji-Yu's ancient eyes. Whereas when Xianxia heard the word, chaotic life soil, his entire body went still and he almost didn't dare believe his ears. The chaotic life soil was a rare item that wasn't within the 5 elements. According to legend, at the chaotic times during the absolute beginning of the world, numerous beings of the chaotic era were born from chaotic life soil. Once the heaven and earth were separated from each other and the 3 dimensions were established, chaotic life soil was buried within boundless time and had never appeared ever again. Of course, this was merely a legend she had heard, and its truth couldn't be verified. But when he found out that a trace of the aura of chaotic life soil was actually suffused on the chamber door before him, she couldn't help but be shocked fiercely. This trace of chaotic life soil aura has already become extremely faint, and it can't be gathered at all. Ji-Yu's eyes faintly gazed at the chamber door and muttered to himself. But this chamber door actually has a trace of chaotic life soil aura. The thing stored within is surely extraordinary. As he spoke, Ji-Yu casually pushed open the chamber door. Whoosh! The door had only just been slightly opened when a black silhouette shot out swiftly like lightning. I knew long ago that this would happen. Want to run? It isn't that easy. Ji-Yu smiled indifferently, and he flicked his sleeve as he spoke. A misty azure fog flowed like a waterfall as it swept out to instantly envelop that black silhouette before dropping onto Ji-Yu's palm. The azure fog dispersed to reveal the appearance of the black silhouette, and to Xianxia's astonishment, the black silhouette was actually a fist-sized infant beast. Roar! The infant beast was entirely white as snow and furry, like a mini white lion. When it saw Xianxia gazing over, it glared with its pitch-black and clear little eyes, then bared its fangs as it emitted a roar, but its roar was extremely tender and didn't possess the slightest bit of deterrent force. It's actually an infant Pishio. When he saw this infant beast, Ji-Yu, who'd always been indifferent, as if he'd see through all worldly matters, emitted a rare and involuntary exclaim of shock. Pishio! Xianxia couldn't help but gasp when he heard that this little fist-sized and snow-white infant beast was actually a Pishio. A Pishio was a primordial divine beast, and it was in existence amongst divine beasts with the most unique status. It devoured and collected the myriad of treasures of the world, and was looked up to as a symbol of auspiciousness since ancient times, as it possessed the bizarre ability to turn misfortune into luck. I never expected that a fallen sword immortal would actually be able to draw a Pishio over to accumulate karmic luck for him. It's truly heaven-defying good fortune. Ji-Yu gazed at the Pishio in his palm and repeatedly praised. Accumulate karmic luck? Xianxia was slightly muddled. According to his knowledge, karmic luck was unreal and difficult to understand. It was absolutely not something that could be seen with the naked eye, and it seemed extremely rare for there to be a method to change one's karmic luck. However, there was a publicly acknowledged saying in the cultivation world, a person with exuberant karmic luck would usually receive providence from the Tao of the heavens. The person's cultivation would be ever successful and achieved without effort. Moreover, the person would possess great fortune and obtain various enviable lucky encounters. Whereas a person with insufficient karmic luck would have a life full of misfortune. Although this misfortune wasn't terrible to the extent of attracting an unexpected calamity, the person would have no chance of having any great luck during the person's lifetime. Of course, due to karmic luck being unreal and impossible to be noticed with the naked eye, The karmic luck of everyone would change according to various things that occurred. At this moment, when he heard the Pisho was actually able to accumulate the unreal karmic luck, it was obvious how shocked Xianxia's mind was. Jiyu nodded. Exactly. Towards ordinary people in the world, a Pisho is an auspicious beast that brings in wealth and treasure. But to cultivators, possessing a Pisho at their side, they would be completely capable of turning a person's life around, or even the karmic luck of an entire sect. As he spoke up to hear, Jiyu's expression was complicated and he went silent for a long time. Then he sighed. In short, you'll understand the use of karmic luck once your cultivation attains the heavenly immortal realm. Heavenly immortal realm again? She couldn't help but recall the instructions of his mother, Zuoqiu Shui. She'd said that only when he'd attained the heavenly immortal realm would he be able to see her. Otherwise, it would only be a disaster and not fortune. Whereas at this moment, because of a fist-sized infant Pisho and the divine ability it possesses to accumulate karmic luck once again involved attaining the heavenly immortal realm, causing Xianxia to faintly feel that it seemed that he would only have the qualifications to do anything he wanted to do once he attained the heavenly immortal realm. Jiyu's expression slightly twitched as he seemed to have noticed something, and he said, "Someone has entered the treasure hall. We have to take action quickly." Xianxia's heart constricted, and he hurriedly pushed open the chamber door and walked in. At the moment he entered, 6 incomparably enormous white jade racks entered his eyes, and they were labeled at the top in order of yellow rank, profound rank, earth rank, heaven rank, immortal artifact, and rare items. Obviously, these 6 enormous white jade racks were precisely the place the immortal, nether enlightenment, used to store his treasures. However, at this moment, the 6 white jade racks were instead completely empty. Why is it like this? Xianxia hurriedly walked forward and his gaze swept past the white jade racks. Not to mention magic treasures, there wasn't even a hair on the racks, as it was squeaky clean. Oh, now I remember. The treasures here ought to have been eaten by this Pisho. Jiyu was stunned as well. Then he quickly recovered from his shock, then shook his head as he laughed. How could I have forgotten? This little fellow loves to eat treasures and rare items. So long as it carried spirit energy with it, then no matter what it was, it would all be a delicacy in its mouth. Xianxia was instead unable to laugh and his gaze stared right at the Pisho in Jiyu's palm. He was truly unable to imagine how a body that was the size of a fist was actually able to eat treasures that filled an entire room. How could this be possible? Roar! The furry and snow-white infant Pisho that was like a little lion bared its fangs at Xianxia as it roared twice, and it seemed to be demonstrating its might. But when coupled with its tender roar and pair of clear pitch-black little eyes, it didn't seem ferocious but instead was extremely cute. If a girl were to see it, the girl would surely knead it into a ball in her arms. Then haven't we come here for nothing? Xianxia muttered, and as he gazed at the empty white jade rack that was labeled with immortal artifact, he really wished for nothing more than to choke the Pisho to death. Immortal artifacts. Just these 2 words caused his blood to boil, but it just so happened that he'd missed the opportunity to possess one. How could this be considered as coming here for nothing? I think your gains are already great enough. Look properly, this is a Pisho. Jiyu was extremely puzzled, and he said, even if you have over 10,000 immortal artifacts, it would still be unable to compare with a Pisho. Xianxia looked at Jiyu's serious and solemn expression and gaped, and he could only forcefully swallow his belly full of grievance. Senior Jiyu, let's go to the book reserve. Xianxia turned around to walk out of the chamber, and he still felt extreme regret in his heart as he said inwardly, if it's eaten then it's eaten. There shouldn't be any divine beast that likes to eat those cultivation techniques, right? Step, step, step. A wave of constant footsteps resounded. Not long after Xianxia left, a young man in royal blue clothing excitedly pushed open the chamber door and walked in. When he saw the immortal artifact and other labels on the 6 white jade racks, his expression suddenly became excited, and his breathing became hurried as well. However, when his gaze descended onto the completely empty racks, his face instantly froze, and his body started to tremble involuntarily as a mouthful of fresh blood surged out of his throat. Ah! 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 God damn it! Everything from yellow rank magic treasures to immortal artifacts were here. Yet someone beat me to the punch and wiped it squeaky clean. Motherfucker. It's fine if you take the larger portion, but you don't even leave scraps for others. The lips of the blue-clothed young man trembled as he emitted a sharp howl full of grief, and his voice was so loud that it spread throughout the entire treasure hall's corridors. Whoosh! 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 In next to no time, numerous figures appeared within this chamber, and as they gazed at the 6 completely empty white jade racks, they knew that someone had beaten them to the punch. Their expressions became extremely unsightly. Bloody hell! If I find out who did this, I'll definitely skin him alive. Look at the words. Immortal artifacts were stored on that white jade rack. It was actually swept clean by someone. We're all fellow Taoists. How could he have been so selfish? Truly going too far. He doesn't even know the rules of the cultivation world. He's too goddamn virtuous. These young men and women were the young geniuses from the great powers of Dragon Lake City and were existences like favored geniuses of the gods. Normally, they were extremely arrogant and haughty, and they'd entered the Sword Immortal's abode this time while carrying extremely large hopes. However, at this moment, as they gazed upon the completely empty surroundings, they recalled how they'd been exhausted to death all the way here and took such a huge risk coming here, yet didn't get anything. They didn't care about bearing any longer as they burst out all at once, insulting that fellow who greedily emptied out the entire room and left nothing behind. Did all of you not find any treasures within the other chambers? Su Jiao's expression was extremely unsightly, as she'd searched over 100 chambers earlier, but actually didn't find a single treasure. Yeah, exactly. The others were stunned. Then they repeatedly nodded as they agreed with what the others said before them. Su Jiao was extremely furious as she stared fixedly at the 6 completely empty white jade racks and said, "Looks like this is the true place that treasures are stored within the treasure hall, but it just so happened that someone has beat us to the punch. Truly detestable. Is it Du Qingxi's group?" Songbin said suddenly. His face was pitch black like the bottom of a pan. Obviously, he was extremely aggrieved as well. Impossible, we arrived before them. Su Jiao shook her head in denial. Then, is it those Violet Palace realm cultivators that came from other places in the southern territory? Songbin still clearly remembered that when they left Bloodbath City, his group wasn't the first to have left. Never mind. Let's not think about it for now. This place is only the treasure hall and we haven't gone to the other halls. Now that the treasure hall has already been completely robbed of everything it had, we can't allow others to take the treasures within the other halls. Su Jiao took a deep breath and forcefully restrained the rage in her heart before slowly saying, "If we're able to hurry over in time, we even might be able to find that fellow that robbed the treasure hall of everything." The others awoke from their rage when they heard this, and they understood that what Su Jiao said was indeed the most important matter right now. Immediately, all of them carried their belly full of grievance as they dashed out of the treasure hall under Su Jiao's lead. They desperately urged their true essence and didn't stop a moment on the way at all. "Just you wait, kid. This young master's things aren't so easily taken. God damn it. If I catch this kid, I'll surely skin him alive, inch by inch. This fellow is too cruel. I wonder if this fellow is a man or a woman. If he's a man, then if the Tao companion this young miss has in the future is of similar virtue to him, I'll fucking kill him." After a quarter of an hour, Su Jiao led the others out of a hall with a gloomy expression. What a rubbish martial Tao hall. There were just a few rocks in there. It was even inferior to my Azure Sun Sect's training grounds. One of them couldn't refrain from saying angrily. Su Jiao couldn't endure it any longer and snapped, "Shut up." At this moment, she was truly unable to control her feelings any longer. They went to the treasure hall, but someone had beaten them to the punch and cleaned it out. They'd come to the Martial Tao Hall, but there were only some lousy rocks used for cultivating sword techniques. Not mentioning having gone these places for nothing, they'd also wasted a huge amount of time. How could she be able to endure the rage in her heart when she thought of the possibility that others might be dividing up the treasures within the other halls right now? Let's go. We'll go to the other hall. Even if all the treasures have been obtained by others, we'll seize it from them. Killing intent openly raged within Su Jiao's voice. The others all revealed fierce gazes when they saw this, and they followed behind Su Jiao to violently dash forward. The strengths of these people were fairly outstanding in the first place, coupled with the flames of rage that broke out within their chests. It was only a short moment before they'd already arrived before another hall. Book Reserve Hall? Damn it! Someone has gone in. Su Jiao's eyes lit up, but her face couldn't help but go cold when she saw the half-open door. And she said word for word, "Looks like we really have to kill others and seize the treasures. God damn it! I've been wanting to kill someone since a long time ago. I was waiting for you to say this. This young master is about to die from grievance. Let's go." Everyone had a belly full of grievance and practically didn't need to be notified as they impatiently charged into the hall with raging killing intent, and their appearances seemed like bandits that wished for nothing more than to kill people and rob them. Book Reserve Hall. Contrary to the layout of the treasure hall, there weren't any chambers, and at the instant one entered the hall, it was an enormous space that covered an area of 3,000 meters. Rows upon rows of 30 tall bookshelves could be found all over. They stood layer upon layer to occupy every space within the entire hall. If one were to look down from a high vantage point, one would be able to see that these rows of bookshelves formed an octagonal shape, and were like orderly layers of a blossoming flower bud. Walking within it was like walking into a winding maze. Everywhere one's gaze passed was filled bookshelves that were densely piled with jade slips, and one was unable to discern any direction. At this moment, Xianxia had stopped before a bookshelf, as he'd walked along the hall and gone around all the bookshelves. Talisman crafting, puppeteering, taming, botany, divine abilities, techniques. This book reserve hall actually covers and contains everything. Xianxia couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Nearby, Jiyu put down a jade slip in his hand and shook his head. A huge number doesn't mean it's rare and valuable. According to what I've seen, most of the jade slips are all ordinary. Xianxia didn't argue, as he knew that Jiyu was extremely picky, and Jiyu holding these jade slips in contempt was within reason. Moreover, these jade slips were extremely precious to Xianxia. He was impoverished since a young age. When he'd gone to Pine Mist City's exquisite pavilion to purchase the martial techniques he'd required, he was actually ridiculed by the female attendant. If it wasn't for the little princess of the general's estate, Qin Hongmian, stepping forward, he could only swallow the insult and humiliation silently, then leave in dejection. So, at this moment, he'd already decided inwardly that even if he didn't cultivate it, he would still take away these jade slips that were practically as vast as the ocean. Exchanging them for spirit stones would still be an enormous sum of wealth. However, right at this moment, a wave of footsteps suddenly sounded out from outside the hall. Someone has come so quickly. Xianxia was shocked inwardly. At this moment, it was already impossible for him to plunder all these jade slips. But he was extremely reluctant to miss the opportunity to obtain so many jade slips. What should I do? I came back empty-handed from the treasure hall. Could it be that I'm going to meet the same fate at the book reserve hall now? I've helped you pick sword techniques, divine abilities, and movement techniques. What else do you lack? As he spoke, Jiyu extended his hand out and successively swept it through the air, and numerous jade slips flew over to him as if they'd grown wings. Xianxia was stunned, then asked, "Can we take them all?" Jiyu's face sank and he stopped what he was doing. Xianxia cursed inwardly. He'd been together with Jiyu for a long time and understood Jiyu's character extremely well. Jiyu could devote himself to guide Xianxia's cultivation, but if Xianxia were to ask him to do something he wasn't willing to do, then it would absolutely not be possible. According to what Jiyu said, only when Xianxia had passed all the trials within the Heaven Peak of Trials to become the personal disciple of the Master of the Manor would Xianxia be able to order him around. At this moment, when he saw Jiyu was displeased, Xianxia apologized right away. "Senior Jiyu, I'm sorry, it was Junior that was too greedy. If I'm able to choose, then I hope to obtain some talisman crafting jade slips." Xianxia knew that so long as he spoke of things related to talisman crafting, Jiyu would surely be extremely happy. Because his master, Senior Fushi, had precisely observed the river diagram to deduce the profound meaning behind the cycle of the secrets of the heavens to gain sudden comprehension the grand Tao and ascend to the peak of the Tao. Whereas it was precisely because he himself had comprehension in the Tao of talismans that he was able to walk out of the star secret realm and obtain Jiyu's acknowledgement. As expected, Jiyu's expression instantly eased up significantly when he heard that she was still constantly thinking of the Tao of talismans. Jiyu snorted coldly before extending his hand out to sweep through the air, and 10+ jade slips once again shot out towards him. 13 talisman crafting jade slips, coupled with the jade slips related to sword techniques, movement techniques, and divine abilities, I already possess 20 jade slips. Although it's only a speck in the vast ocean that is the book reserve hall, jade slips that were able to be picked by Senior Jiyu ought to be gems within this sea. Xianxia casually stored the jade slips within his storage ring, then followed behind Jiyu to dash off the way he came in. The sound of footsteps grew closer and closer, and it was vaguely mixed with the clamorous sounds of people. All the cultivators that were able to enter the hall were at the Violet Palace realm and had formed groups before coming. The large gap in their strengths and numbers caused Xianxia to not dare stay on any longer. Moreover, for the sake of preventing his tracks from being noticed, he didn't even touch the numerous jade slips on the nearby bookshelves, as he was afraid others would notice something from the traces left behind. Different to how the others entered the hall via the main door, Xianxia had entered through a concealed little passageway from the main hall. If one didn't search carefully, it would be extremely difficult to notice this passageway, so he didn't encounter a single cultivator all through his return journey. Ha ha ha! Book Reserve Hall. The Book Reserve Hall, the Immortal, Nether Enlightenment, left behind. Hoarse and shrill laughter suddenly resounded out within the hall. The jade slips on these rows of bookshelves are probably at least a few tens of thousands and have been covered in dust for 10,000 years. Now it will instead benefit us. It's truly an extremely great good fortune. This fellow really doesn't disguise his excitement. Huh? Xianxia stood before a faraway concealed door and couldn't help but shake his head when he heard this voice. And he was just about to step into the concealed door and leave when he suddenly heard a familiar voice sound out, causing him to stop dead in his tracks. Fellow Taoists of the Phoenix Cloud sect, aren't you getting excited too soon? The voice was hearty and warm, but when it entered Xianxia's ears, it instead caused killing intent to surge within his heart. Chai Ledian. Even if he turned to ash, Xianxia would still recognize the owner of this voice, as he recalled being stabbed in the back by this fellow in the Crimson Flame mountain range, which caused him to fall down the deep chasm. The hatred in Xianxia's heart uncontrollably surged, and his expression went extremely icy cold. Senior Jiyu, I've decided to stay back. Xianxia took a deep breath and sent a voice transmission with a deep voice. Jiyu glanced at Xianxia and said indifferently, "Take care of your enemy yourself. I won't help you even if you're killed by him." Xianxia nodded. Only by killing his enemy with his own 2 hands would he be able to vent the roiling hatred in his heart. Whoosh! Xianxia glanced at the surroundings. Then his body arched as the tip of his feet lightly tapped the floor, and he nimbly scurried up the stone beam in the corner like a silent leopard cat. This stone beam was 3 meters wide and was arranged in a crisscross pattern with tens of stone beams, like a large net that ran through the top of the entire hall, and he didn't have to worry about being discovered when hiding here. Moreover, he was able to see the scene within the entire hall from this position. According to Xianxia's conjecture, those Phoenix Cloud sect cultivators would surely initiate a battle with Chai Lishan's group for the sake of competing for the jade slips within the hall. In this way, he would be completely able to hide here and pick the best opportunity to launch a sneak attack on Chai Ledian. Violet Palace realm cultivators already possess perception force. Moreover, their 6 senses were acute and were extremely sensitive to their surroundings. Xianxia didn't dare utilize his perception force. He restrained the aura on his entire body, then lay flat on the stone beam, like a wisp of a black silhouette. At the same time, his eyes narrowed into slits as he carefully gazed at the hall below. At this moment, 2 groups of cultivators had already gathered within the hall. One group was the group of cultivators led by Chai Ledian, with Xianxia's acquaintances like Du Qingxi, Duanmuzhe, Song Lin, whereas on the opposite side was a few unfamiliar cultivators who wore varied clothing and were of various ages. The four people in the lead were extremely conspicuous: a gaunt old man, a stalwart middle-aged man, a young man, and a young woman. The four of them wore similar crimson-purple robes with exquisite patterns of a fire phoenix dancing in the air while surrounded by clouds. They were shockingly those Phoenix Cloud sect cultivators that Xianxia had seen within Bloodbath City. At the moment, the two groups had already taken out their magic treasures and weapons and were in confrontation on the space in the middle of the bookshelves, ready to fight. The gaunt old man from Phoenix Cloud sect said coldly, "Humph, even though all of you are disciples that are from the various great powers of Dragon Lake City and have extraordinary status, but I'm sorry, for the sake of the jade slips here, asking us to leave is absolutely impossible. Not only would I, Fu Hong, not agree, the fellow Taoists behind me would absolutely not agree as well. Right, will absolutely not agree. Want us to leave on our own? No chance." All the other cultivators behind the gaunt old man echoed his views, yet their expressions weren't relaxed. Obviously, Chai Lishan's group brought quite an amount of pressure to them. Why torture yourselves? If you offend us, then would your small sects be able to live on happily after this? Chai Letian said unhurriedly. Could it be that all of you aren't worried that the sects all of you represent will be pulled up from the roots and completely annihilated? I advise all of you to leave quickly. Brother Chai's ancestor is one of the great nether transformation realm cultivators of the Southern Territory. Dealing with all of you would only be a matter of giving the order. The myriad cloud institutions Yu Haobai shook his head and sighed. He seemed elegant and refined, yet his tone was filled with the intent to curry favor with Chai Letian. The gaunt Fu Heng's expression flickered between a pale and grim expression, and he was violently struggling within his heart. Whereas behind him, the expressions of those cultivators from various cities in the Southern Territory had mostly become quite gloomy. The deterrent force of a nether transformation realm cultivator is so great. She couldn't help but become anxious when he saw Fu Hong and the others' will to fight was fading. If Fu Heng's group fled before a battle, then his plans to sneak attack Chen Letian would come to naught. Humph. According to my knowledge, the great nether transformation realm cultivator, Senior Chai Shao, isn't a person that's unreasonable. Not to mention that this sword immortal's abode is derelict and the jade slips here belong to whomever who gets it. Aren't you going too far by asking us to leave with just a word? Fu Hong gritted his teeth. In my opinion, why don't we do it like this? If fellow Taoist Chai agrees, then my group will take 40% of the jade slips here, and the remaining 60% belongs to your group. How about it? Absolutely impossible. Chai Letian refused right away and sneered coldly. Want to take things from me? You aren't worthy. I'll give you another 10 breaths of time. Hurry up and fuck off from this hall. Otherwise, don't blame us for being merciless. You? Fu Heng's eyes were wide open with exasperation, and he was actually angered to the point he was unable to speak. Humph! You dare come here and try taking things from me with this level of courage? Hurry up. 5 breaths of time have already passed. Chai Letian shook his head in disdain. These fellows have the intentions but not the courage. She couldn't help but be speechless as he gazed at Fu Heng's group, who didn't dare do anything, and were silently swallowing the insult and humiliation. Humph! I was wondering who it was. So it turned out to be fellow Taoist Chai from Starnet Palace. It was at this moment that a delicate voice of a woman slowly echoed out within the hall. She gazed over and couldn't refrain from saying inwardly, "Shit, Su Jiao's group has actually come here as well." Along with the entrance of Su Jiao's group into the book reserve hall, the confrontational atmosphere became even more strained. As they gazed at the two groups of people who were in conflict, Su Jiao and the group behind her had incomparably gloomy expressions with gazes filled with undisguised killing intent. Another 13 people have come. Moreover, they're all disciples of the various large powers of Dragon Lake City. The Phoenix Cloud sect's Fu Hong gasped inwardly. At this moment, the development of the situation had already exceeded his expectations, but the only thing that made him feel relieved was that due to the entrance of Su Jiao's group, even if Chai Lishan's group wanted to make a move against him, they would surely have scruples. The expressions of Chai Letian and the people behind him all went serious when they saw Su Jiao's group, and they lost their earlier expressions of having victory within their grasps. At this moment, a shocking three-way had formed within the hall, three powers each taking a corner and restraining each other, and a slight movement may affect the situation as a whole. Under these circumstances, no one dared make a rash move. Miss Su, the book reserve hall has already been occupied by us now. All of you better not interfere here and harm the good relationship between each other. That wouldn't be a good sight to behold. Chai Letian said coldly. Su Jiao, who had a bellyful of rage from coming out empty-handed from the treasure hall and Marshal Dao Hall, couldn't help but sneer when she saw Chai Letian wanting to drive her off the moment he spoke. Cut the crap. That old freak from your clan can't scare me. Audacious! Yu Haobai behind Chai Letian shouted out explosively. Senior Chai Xiao is one of the few remaining nether transformation realm cultivators within the Southern Territory, and you actually dare insult him as an old freak? You really have no idea of death or danger. Humph! Cut the crap. Isn't it just comparing ancestors? Song Bin, who was beside Su Jiao, sneered silently, then said, Chai Letian has a nether transformation realm ancestor backing him, but Miss Su's elder brother Su Chan has already become the only closed-door disciple of the Wandering Cloud Sword Sect's Rebirth Realm Sword Cultivator. Ancestor Ling Du in 1,000 years. Do you think that what you said has any meaning now? Ancestor Ling Du. All the people present, including Chai Letian, seemed as if they'd heard an extremely terrifying thing, and their faces went pale in unison. Su Jiao's elder brother has actually become a disciple of Ancestor Ling Du? Atop a concealed corner on the far-away stone beams that were extremely high up, she couldn't help but be shocked. If one were to speak in terms of the most formidable, then amongst the powers of Dragon Lake City, the Wandering Cloud Sword Sect would take the top without a doubt. Allegedly, there were quite many formidable earthly immortal realm sword cultivators living in seclusion within Wandering Cloud Sword Sect. Ancestor Ling Du was precisely a well-renowned rebirth realm sword cultivator within Wandering Cloud Sword Sect. His temper was explosive and slaughtered cruelly, and his reputation was extremely resounding within the entire Southern Territory's cultivation world, and could be said to be known by all. Humph! No wonder you're so confident. So it turned out lucky bastard, Su Chan, has become a disciple of Ancestor Ling Du. Chai Lishan's expression quickly returned to normal. Then he shook his head and said in disdain, Su Chan is Su Chan, you Su Jiao are Su Jiao. Do you think Ancestor Ling Du would offend the ancestor of my clan for your sake? Su Jiao's expression remained unfazed. Yet she sighed inwardly. Chai Letian was correct indeed. She wasn't directly related to Ancestor Ling Du after all, and it was merely able to allow her to put on some tiger skin. It was absolutely impossible for her to get Ancestor Ling Du to offend a nether transformation realm cultivator, which was a realm higher than himself, for her sake. However, Su Jiao was absolutely not a simple person, and her eyes balls revolved, and she'd already thought of a plan. She paid no attention to Chai Letian and instead shot her gaze as Fu Hong and the others before saying with a smile, I presume all of you are unwilling to enter the book reserve hall but leave empty-handed, right? How about we join forces and kill all of them? We'll share all the jade slips within this hall equally. How about it? Fu Hong had never expected that Su Jiao would put forward such a suggestion, and he was stunned briefly before saying, But, Su Jiao interrupted, you don't have to worry about anything else. This is the southern barbaric nether domain after all. So long as we don't speak of it, then no one will know who'd killed anyone within this place, right? So long as we annihilate Chai Lishan's group and share the jade slips amongst our two groups, who would be stupid enough to reveal this incident to another? Fu Heng's gaze burned with desire as he'd obviously been moved by Su Jiao's words. Su Jiao's suggestion was indeed vicious and effective. Chai Lishan's group only consisted of 8 Violet Palace realm cultivators and weren't able to compare with any of the other two groups. If they were to be attacked by the joint forces of these two groups, the two groups were indeed capable of completely annihilating Chai Lishan's group. Fellow Taoist Fu, if you dare do this, then you'll surely regret it. Chai Letian was eventually unable to maintain his composure, and his face abruptly went grim as he shouted. Could it be that you're not afraid that Su Jiao would burn the bridge after crossing it and kill all of you, then take possession of all the jade slips within this hall? Fu Hong was stunned, and his expression once again became indecisive. Obviously, he was worried that Su Jiao would do this as well. How about all of you work together with me? We'll annihilate Su Jiao's groups. We'll split these jade slips according to what you said earlier. How about a 4 to 6 split? Chai Letian inwardly heaved a sigh of relief and struck while the iron was hot. Fu Hong was in an extremely difficult position. He'd completely never imagined that his group, which was originally the weakest, had become a hot cake that both of the other two groups had to fight for. It just so happened that, for the sake of guarding against the others burning the bridge after crossing it, he couldn't agree to either of the two groups. What should I do? When faced with such a situation, Fu Hong and the others behind him were all in a difficult situation between the two groups. Damn it! If they continue discussing like this, they'll figure something out sooner or later. In this way, how am I to take advantage of the commotion to sneak attack Chai Letian? She couldn't help but become inwardly anxious when he saw the three groups of people not getting into battle for a long time. Then a flash of inspiration flashed within his mind as he suddenly thought of an excellent plan. Time trickled by, yet the atmosphere was more and more oppressive. The groups were unable to start a fight, nor were they able to split up the jade slips within the hall, and they could only stand by anxiously and waste time. In my opinion, our three groups shouldn't contend with each other any longer. How about we discuss a way to share all these jade slips? Chai Letian was finally impatient from waiting, and he put forward his suggestion with reluctance in his heart. All right, we agree if this is possible. Su Jiao inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. She was afraid they'd continue wasting time and another person would interfere into the matter. Then the situation would be even more chaotic. The suggestion of fellow Taoist Chai is indeed what we're anxiously looking forward to. Fu Hong let out a long sigh as well. Comparatively speaking, his group was the weakest and possessed the strongest pressure, so he was naturally unwilling to get into a fight with the other two groups. However, right at this moment, an unexpected voice abruptly resounded within the hall. Brother Chai, things aren't going well. Those people from the Phoenix Cloud sect are actually gathering precious jade slips as well. Phoenix Cloud sect? Gathering precious jade slips? Everyone present was stunned when they heard this. Qingxi? He's actually still alive? When this voice entered the ears of Du Qingxi, Duanmu Zhe, and Song Lin, their hearts suddenly shook and their faces were filled with disbelief. That trash is actually still alive? But what does he mean by what he just said? Chai Letian was stunned. Then he figured it out and his face instantly went black like the bottom of a pan. God damn it! What atrocious methods! Su Jiao had discerned who the owner of the voice was, and her gaze swept towards behind Chai Letian. As expected, she didn't notice a trace of Qingxi. When she recalled the information revealed from what Xianxia said, her face instantly went extremely icy cold and she started laughing out of extreme rage, then said word for word, "You, Chai Letian, deserve to be called scheming and calculating. You first send people to gather the precious jade slips, then put forward the suggestion to share the jade slips within the hall equally, leaving those trash jade slips to us. You're truly going too far. Miss Su, listen to me. Xianxia is deceiving all of you. He hasn't been one of us for a long time now." Chai Letian hurriedly explained. "It has already come to this and you still want to give excuses? Did you think I didn't notice Xianxia following all of you since he left Bloodbath City?" Clang. As she spoke, a flying sword that was fiery red, as if it was ablaze, suddenly appeared in Su Jiao's hand, and her expression was livid. "Looks like we can only resolve this through battle. Everyone, we've been played by these damnable bastards. Kill these two-faced, despicable people." Clang, clang, clang. Song Bin and the others recovered from their shock, and the grievances accumulated from the treasure hall and Martial Dao Hall mixed with the rage from being deceived exploded out now with a bang. They all drew their weapons and gritted their teeth as they charged to attack Chai Lishan's group. Chai Letian was enraged to the point his body trembled. He wanted to explain, but before he could even finish what he wanted to say, he saw various magic treasures with threatening glows of spirit energy covering the entire heaven and earth as they smashed towards him. He didn't dare hesitate as he drew out a magic treasure with a flick of his hand and moved to intercept the attacks. God damn it! We're innocent. The others behind Chai Letian were incomparably aggrieved as well. But when they saw Su Jiao's group attacking without distinguishing between black and white, they became enraged as well. Instantly, their faces went gloomy as they drew their personal magic treasures and entered the fray. Kill! Kill them! Damn it! Su Jiao's group of 13 and Chai Lishan's group of 8 were all Violet Palace Realm cultivators. At this moment, when they each executed the skills they were adept in, true essence shook and roared within the hall. A terrifying stream of air was like a sharp saber as it swept through the surroundings, leaving behind shocking cracks on the walls of the hall. There was an enormous blood-red sword that transformed into a flood dragon as it soared in the sky, biting and roaring. There were over 100 flying swords with dense cold lights that were weaved together to form a sword formation which emitted billowing killing intent. There were roiling black torrents that surged out from within a spirit streamer, rumbling as it charged towards its enemies. All sorts of magic treasures, absolutely ingenious combat measures, and various lights that were disorderly and gorgeous yet filled with a terrifying aura. The destruction caused by all of these colliding with each other seemed to tear space into pieces. The terrifying stream of air caused by the chaotic battle surged towards the surroundings and instantly blasted all the bookshelves in the hall onto the ground, destroying them into pieces. Whereas those jade slips that rolled all over the floor like mercury were pulverized into powder before transforming into ash that disappeared with the wind. The wages for avarice was death. It just so happened that, at this moment, no one cared about the jade slips within the hall as they'd all gone berserk from the slaughter. They exerted all the might within their bodies as they roared and shouted, wishing for nothing more than to make their opponent die a miserable death in their hands. For a time, the scene seemed to be incomparably horrifying, like a living hell. Hey, old dog, wanna flee after you sent people to gather all the precious jade slips? Don't you dare move! Songbin shouted out explosively, and the red lotus blood soul sword in his hand danced about, transforming into an enormous blood-colored waterfall that cleaved straight towards Fu Heng. Damn it! I was entrapped as well, okay? Fu Heng was already angered to the point that his gaunt face trembled after he swung his hand to draw out a glowing glazed-colored shield made of feathers to block the enormous blood-colored sword that was heading towards him. He didn't know Xianxia, but when Xianxia said the words Phoenix Cloud Sect earlier, it caused him to instantly become like a rat on the streets, chased by all with the intent to kill. Regardless of whether it was Su Jiao's or Chai Lishan's groups, they'd all taken him to be a despicable person who'd stolen the precious jade slips, and they attacked him viciously and mercilessly, forcing him to the point he was nearly unable to withstand the attacks. Clang! 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 The red lotus blood soul sword was like a sledgehammer under the control of Songbin's fierce and raging energy, as it repeatedly smashed onto the glazed feather shield. The terrifying force from the sword smashed onto Fu Heng to the point his entire body trembled unceasingly. Then his face went pale. He couldn't restrain it any longer and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. I'm fucking innocent. Innocent. Fu Heng yelled and roared within his heart. Although he had never met Xianxia before, he already hated Xianxia to the bones for throwing him into such a trap. It wasn't just Fu Heng. All the people in his group suffered the same treatment, being chased around by Su Jiao and Chai Lishan's group with an intent to kill. Whereas when they intended to counterattack, they instead noticed that Su Jiao's group and Chai Lishan's group had already lumped together in battle. This sort of utterly chaotic situation almost caused them to be unable to figure out who exactly was the enemy. Could it be that we must stand still and receive their attacks before we can counterattack? Tears covered the faces of Fu Heng's group, who suffered an undeserved calamity. Outside the book reserve hall, after yelling out earlier, she didn't hesitate in the slightest and dashed out of the book reserve hall from the concealed passageway. At this moment, a trace of guilt couldn't help but rise in his heart, as he heard the waves of terrifying sounds of battle echoing out from within the hall, as he felt he'd wronged Du Qingxi, Duanmu Zhe, and Song Lin. Since entering the southern barbaric nether domain and up to the point they entered the Crimson Flame mountain range, the three of them had taken good care of him and had taken him to be a friend. Whereas now, because of something he'd said, they'd fallen into chaotic battle, and this caused Xianxia to feel slightly sorry. It's an undeserved calamity. I only hope they can survive. Please don't let anything happen to them. Xianxia shook his head after silently pondering for a short moment. Then he put away his thoughts before leaping out to dash towards the concealed little passageway that headed to the 100-herb hall. According to his deduction, the battle within the book reserve hall would surely continue for some time before a victor could be decided. He was completely capable of seizing the opportunity when the three groups were in a chaotic battle to clean out the 100-herb hall. Not long after, Xianxia stepped foot into the 100-herb hall. The moment he stepped into the 100-herb hall, the spirit energy that was suffused in the air had actually condensed into numerous masses of mist, and when breathed in, the pure and copious amounts of spirit energy flowed through his entire body, causing Xianxia's spirit to be refreshed. What a great place! This estate has already existed for 10,000 years, and the spirit energy here is still so dense. It's simply unbelievable. Under the nurturing of such dense spirit energy, the quality of the precious plants and herbs within here would surely be extraordinary. As Xianxia breathed in the copious spirit energy in the air that contained traces of the delicate fragrances of grass and trees, his eyes were extremely bright. Xianxia didn't hesitate and started searching through the entire 100-herb hall. The 100-herb hall covered an area of 500 kilometers and was 100 times larger than the treasure hall and book reserve hall. After spending nearly an eighth of an hour, Xianxia finally found the location of the spirit farmland, and he couldn't help but secretly heave a sigh of relief. This was a spirit farmland that was an entire 7+ hectares large, and numerous mist clouds drifted above it. The mist clouds were like cotton and emitted an enchanting luster. Xianxia shockingly noticed after sizing it up that these mist clouds were actually all condensed from spirit energy. However, when his gaze descended onto the spirit farmland, he couldn't help but be stunned. Atop the jet-black and glossy soil was a barren land. Some spirit plants could be vaguely seen atop the spirit farmland, but they were dead and had withered for God knew how long. As he gazed from afar, there was actually not a single spirit plant that was alive. Strange. The spirit energy here is so copious. Why have all these spirit plants withered and died? Xianxia frowned and walked into the spirit farmland, and he swiftly flashed all the way to dash to the depths of the spirit farmland. Gush! Gush! After dashing for nearly 50 kilometers, Xianxia suddenly heard an extremely faint sound of water flowing, and he'd noticed at this moment as well that along with him going deeper into the spirit farmland, the nearby spirit energy had become even more copious. Xianxia dashed another tens of kilometers towards the sound of water before seeing a spring gurgling out. The spring water was pure and flawless like milk, and it emitted a shocking amount of spirit energy. It's actually a spirit spring. Xianxia practically recognized what the spring was with a single glance, and he couldn't help but gasp. Could it be that a top-grade spirit vein was concealed here? Most of the great powers in the world possessed their own prosperous grounds that accumulated spirit energy, and they were superb locations for cultivating. The reason the spirit energy within these prosperous grounds was abundant was the existence of spirit veins. Spirit veins were divided into various grades according to their quality, but a spirit spring that was covered by countless cultivators would only appear nearby a top-grade spirit vein. This was because the springs that flowed out from a spirit spring were all spirit liquids that were condensed from spirit energy. After cultivators advanced to the Violet Palace realm, spirit stones and spirit crystals were useless to them and they had to use spirit liquids to cultivate. However, for an ordinary cultivator, it wasn't such an easy thing to obtain spirit liquids. Unless one became a disciple of a great sect or clan. Otherwise, one could only produce an enormous amount of spirit stones and spirit crystals to purchase spirit liquids, or use treasures to exchange for spirit liquids. This was also precisely the reason why spirit liquids were precious. Xianxia took a deep breath and moved his gaze away from the spirit spring with great difficulty, and only now did he see clearly that a delicate and beautiful lotus that glowed in a misty golden light was shockingly growing on the spirit farmland nearby the spirit spring. Under the cover of the dense mist of spirit energy, it was truly difficult to notice if he didn't look carefully. This lotus wasn't large and was only 65 centimeters tall. Its stem was dazzling like gold with dense striations on its upper portion and glowed with a metallic luster. Every layer of the delicate and beautiful golden lotus petals were fully bloomed, and it contained a myriad of stamens and pistils that were like strands of golden needles linked together, a feast for the eyes. The entire lotus didn't have a trace of anything out of place. It was entirely perfect, causing one to have to praise the miracles of the god of creation. Xianxia's gaze was attracted by a golden fruit that was covered at the center of the layers upon layers of flower petals and strands of stamens and pistils. It was only the size of a goose egg and was completely round. Its surface was coiled by a layer of spirit energy flames, and a strand of sharp aura that seemed material surged out from it, causing it to seem extremely mystical. Xianxia racked his brains but couldn't figure out what this golden lotus actually was. But just from its outwards appearance, Xianxia was able to determine that this thing was surely a spirit plant that was a precious treasure of the heavens and the earth. Gold Soul Divine Lotus. Jiyu appeared out of thin air and cried out involuntarily when he gazed at the lotus. Howl! The infant Pisho in Jiyu's arms sniffed for a moment and its eyes lit up instantly. Then it struggled, wanting to pounce towards the lotus but was pressed down by Jiyu's large hands, causing the little fellow to bare his fangs and howl unceasingly. Senior, what's a Gold Soul Divine Lotus? Xianxia hurriedly stood before the lotus as he spoke, then gazed at the infant Pisho vigilantly. As soon as he recalled that all the treasures within the treasure hall were eaten clean by this little fellow, he felt extremely pained. This lotus is a gold soul treasure that was born from the 5 elements of nature and innately possesses a pure gold soul body. Even in the primordial era, it's an extremely rare treasure. This gold soul divine lotus was born from the metal element of nature, and based on its condition, it's obviously already in the phase of maturity. Jiyu had a burning gaze, and he couldn't help but reveal a slightly envious and astonished expression as he said, "The gold soul divine lotus sprouts after 10 years, becomes a lotus in 100 years, blooms in 1,000 years, and would only bear a lotus fruit after being nurtured for 5,000 years. After that, it would grow larger by a circle every 1,000 years until it's like the size of an infant's fist. If it isn't picked in time, it would fall to the ground and transform back into spirit energy, vanishing within the 5 elements of the 3 dimensions." Xianxia lowered his head and measured it for a moment. The gold soul divine lotus before him just happened to be the size of an infant's fist, and it was precisely just about to reach maturity. This is too much of a coincidence, right? Xianxia was astonished to the point he didn't know how to express himself. He felt the joyous feeling of something falling into his lap. Jiyu felt it was unbelievable as well, but when he saw the Pisho in his arms, he experienced a flash of enlightenment in his heart and said with a weird expression, "When fortune has arrived, it can't be stopped." Who said it can't be stopped? It was at this moment that an icy voice suddenly sounded out. Then the dense mist far away behind Xianxia abruptly started roiling, and 4 or 5 figures could be vaguely seen to be flashing over here explosively. Shit! All my attention was actually caught by a single gold soul divine lotus. It really shouldn't have happened. I'll leave the rest to you. I can only tell you that if the gold soul divine lotus is seized away by another, then you'll regret it for your entire lifetime. Jiyu was stunned, then shook his head as he instructed Xianxia before vanishing into thin air. Xianxia, long time no see. Within the roiling mist, a tall figure appeared before Xianxia. He had sword-shaped eyebrows and starry eyes, with shoulder-length long hair, and he looked at Xianxia with a gaze filled with boundless hatred. Li Huai. Xianxia was startled. He never imagined that he would encounter this fellow here. But he still heaved a sigh of relief inwardly when he found out he was facing an opponent he'd already defeated before. 3 young men with respectful expressions followed behind Li Huai. They all had large foreheads and cold lights within their eyes, but when Xianxia saw them, he instantly determined that these 3 people hadn't advanced to the Violet Palace realm, and at most had a cultivation at the perfection stage of the congenital realm. "This is the gold soul divine lotus you spoke of? It's extraordinary as expected." Li Huai's gaze descended onto the gold soul divine lotus on the spirit farmland, and he emitted an undisguisable burning desire and greed. Looks like this fellow heard everything between me and Senior GU earlier. I originally intended to let him live for a few more days, but for the sake of not letting this secret leak out, I can only kill him this time. Xianxia swiftly contemplated within his mind, and he'd made his decision in an instant, and killing intent immediately appeared within his eyes. Want to kill me? Haha. My cultivation isn't restrained anymore within this sword immortal's abode. Do you have any chance of winning when facing me at the Violet Palace realm? Li Huai roared with laughter, and his voice revealed boundless resentment. Obviously, he'd recalled the scene of being defeated by Xianxia at Bloodbath City. Once I kill you, I'll dedicate this gold soul divine lotus to Miss Su, and using this as an opportunity, she'll surely agree to the marriage with me. You're about to die and you still have so much crap to spout. Xianxia shook his head, and he gazed straight at Li Huai as billowing battle intent surged out from his chest. Li Song, Li Qua, Li Hong, you three just watch from the side. I'll smash this kid into a pulp today. Li Huai waved his hand as he instructed the three nearby Li clan disciples. Then he held his pine ripple sword in his hand, and his gaze was like lightning as his formidable aura locked onto Xianxia. Xianxia didn't continue speaking. The tip of his foot tapped the ground as his entire body was like an arrow that left the bow, flashing explosively towards Li Huai. Hiss! Hiss! As he dashed, his body actually tore numerous long waves of air in the surrounding air. These waves of air surged out and crackled like surging river water with extremely shocking force. After using the Netherism baleful chi at the foundation of the formation in the bottom of the chasm to attain the perfection stage of the congenital realm in body refinement, Xianxia's body was like a treasured sword that was tempered within a furnace for millions of times. His vital energy and blood shot into the sky like a rainbow. The bones and tendons within his body were refined like jade, and there wasn't a shred of impurities within his entire body. When he dashed out, his body was light like a swallow and combined with the heavenly dragon's 8 steps. His speed was at least 20% faster than before. Bang! The sky shook as a fist that was covered in terrifying force smashed straight at Li Huai's face. It was exactly the same move that he used when fighting Li Huai outside Bloodbath City. This move again. Humph! You're underestimating me. Li Huai! Too much! As he shouted, thick true essence abruptly surged out from Li Huai's body, and his body lifted off the ground with a swish to fly up mid-air. Bang! His fist missed and the powerful true essence blasted onto the spirit farmland like a plow as it smashed out numerous deep trenches, and dirt flew out into the surroundings. Ha ha! Violet Palace realm cultivators can fly in the air. Idiot! Li Huai laughed arrogantly in mid-air. Whereas seizing the opportunity when Li Huai was talking, Xianxia didn't stop and instead charged towards the 3 nearby young men. Bang! 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 One of the Li clan disciples was caught off guard. His skull was directly shattered by a single punch, and he died on the spot. The other 2 of them crossed their arms in defense, but they were still unable to flee from this calamity. It was as if a 150,000 kilograms sledgehammer had fiercely smashed onto their arms, causing their bones to be shattered into bits. The terrifying force that surged out from Xianxia's fist shook the 2 of them to the point they fiercely spat out a mouthful of blood before flying out over 30 m and were unable to get up anymore. The school of fiend god body refinement had always been a terrifying existence that annihilated all chi refiners of the same cultivation. Now that Xianxia's physique was refined to the perfection stage of the congenital realm, it was completely capable of being on par against an ordinary graded magic treasure, allowing him to possess a strength that was mighty and bones and tendons that were formidable. By just relying on the strength of his body, it was more than sufficient for him to slaughter these 3 Li clan disciples that were only at the congenital realm. You're courting death. Li Huai's face suddenly went grim. He was in mid-air, yet the pine ripple sword in his hand transformed into an azure light that fiercely slashed at Xianxia, and it was precisely the ability to control magic treasures that only Violet Palace realm cultivators were able to master. Whoosh! The pine ripple sword was extremely swift like lightning, and the terrifying force of the sword even tore through the air, shaking the surrounding spirit energy to disperse with a bang. Xianxia was shocked inwardly, unable to dodge in time. He swung out his fist to smash the flying sword that shot violently towards him. Unexpectedly, the flying sword suddenly changed directions mid-air and swept past an arc as it swiftly glided past his ribs. Pest! His clothes tore open and a faint bruise appeared on his body that was hard like cast iron. But even then, she still couldn't help from sweating out cold sweat from shock. How could it be possible? This pine ripple sword is a low-grade yellow-rank magic treasure. How could it be unable to injure this fellow? In mid-air, Li Huai was stunned, and his expression became unsightly. Come the fuck down. Even though he wasn't injured, but it still infuriated Xianxia. His vast true essence poured into his arms and they instantly smashed out a myriad of times, and transparent fists that seemed to be material shot out from his hands. These transparent fists seemed like they were carved from crystal and were glittering and translucent. They were condensed and compressed from true essence, then smashed out by Xianxia's third level of the grand collapsing fist. Collapsing rocks into powder, and were like a meteor rain that whistled in the sky, emitting extremely shocking sounds and might. Humph! It's only true essence discharge. It's unable to do anything to me. Li Huai sneered. A myriad of sharp sword lights suddenly slashed out from the pine ripple sword that coiled around his body, slashing towards those fists that whistled towards him like the rain. Bang! A transparent fist directly smashed a sword light into pieces, and its momentum didn't reduce in the slightest as it continued to smash towards Li Huai. Not good. How could I have forgotten that this kid's fist technique has already attained the unity stage, and is able to draw support from the energy of the heaven and earth to increase its might explosively? Li Huai was stunned, then suddenly recalled the scene of when he was battle Xianxia outside Bloodbath City, and his face instantly went gloomy. Bang! 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 Countless transparent fists were like a large fisherman's net as it shattered all the myriad of sword lights that stood in its way to encircle and siege Li Huai, who stood in the center. Damn it! One wrong move caused him to lose the initiative of the battle. Li Huai could only grit his teeth and circulate the true essence within his entire body, then grab a hold of his pine ripple sword to swing out sword shadows that were like billowing spindrifts as they flashed out, forming a watertight defense around his surroundings. At the same time, he instead flashed explosively towards the distance, attempting to rush out of the encirclement of the transparent fists that came from all around him. Bang! A transparent fist smashed on the sword shadow around Li Huai's body. The terrifying true essence contained within it surged out, and it directly smashed Li Huai flying. Bang! 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 Before Li Huai could even catch his breath, another few more fists exploded in around his body, once again blasting him out over 30 m away, and his body was staggering and almost dropped to the ground. At this moment, Li Huai's hair was disheveled and hung down loosely, and his clothes were in rags. His exposed skin was completely charred, and his appearance was in an extremely sorry state. He didn't dare continue trying to flaunt his superiority any longer and leaped to the ground. Only then did he escape the encirclement of those transparent fists. This is absolutely not real. This kid's cultivation is only at the congenital realm, and he's even barehanded. How could he possibly be so formidable? Li Huai gazed at Xianxia in disbelief. It was truly difficult for him to imagine that everything from earlier was caused by this fellow that he'd always insulted as trash. He'd always thought that he lost to Xianxia outside of Bloodbath City because his cultivation was restrained and it provided Xianxia with an opportunity to exploit. However, now, when he utilized the cultivation of the Violet Palace realm, yet was still forced down from mid-air by Xianxia, this situation caused him to be utterly unable to accept this reality. Why is it like this? Could it be that this kid is an expert that concealed himself, and has always been a wolf in sheep's clothing? At the instant that Li Huai's mind pondered swiftly, Xianxia couldn't help but once again get a clear understand of his strength. Only now did he realize, relying on my perfection stage of the congenital realm cultivation in both body refinement and chi refinement, and my grand collapsing fist that's at the unity stage, I'm completely able to battle a Violet Palace realm cultivator. However, Li Huai has obviously only advanced to the Violet Palace realm not long ago, and his live combat experience is even inferior to me. That's why I was able to seize the initiative in the battle and force him to descend from the sky, It would seem that I'm only able to battle some fellows who are at the initial stage of the Violet Palace realm and have bad live combat experience. As for those slightly formidable Violet Palace realm cultivators, I still have to carefully deal with them if I encounter them in the future. After he thought all this through, Xianxia didn't hesitate anymore and launched an attack once again. And his fists were like descended droplets of rain, as they completely didn't give Li Huai any chance to fly up once again. The situation started to become disadvantageous to Li Huai. A portion of his will to fight was taken away by Xianxia's attacks earlier, and now that he was devastated by Xianxia from being forcefully suppressed to battle on the ground, he'd completely fallen into a situation of passive defense. However, it was also impossible for Xianxia to finish Li Huai off in a short amount of time, as this fellow swung his pine ripple sword about to the point even a drop of water couldn't pass through, and as it defended the surroundings of his body, he was virtually like a tortoise that had cowered within its shell. Gurgle, gurgle. The muscles that glowed with a jade-like luster on his entire body expanded and popped out, then fluctuated ceaselessly like a tide with an extremely rhythmic motion, and the vital qi and blood in his body was as if lit ablaze and emitted waves of thunderous roars. The appearance of Li Huai while passively taking a beating was extremely similar to a sparring dummy, and this caused Xianxia to think of a good plan. He'd decided to use Li Huai to test how formidable exactly was his body, and he didn't utilize his true essence any longer and started to use the pure strength of his body. Bang! 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 He'd already confirmed earlier that the pine ripple sword in Li Huai's hand wasn't able to injure his tendons and bones. So, Xianxia didn't have the slightest worries as he executed his fist techniques now, and coupled with the combat expertise he's honed from fighting life and death battles, he was able to force his opponent to the point his opponent only had the strength to ward off his blows and nothing more. This feeling was simply captivating and addictive. Li Huai completely didn't notice that he'd already become the sparring dummy for Xianxia to test the strength of his body. But at this moment he was utterly unable to notice all this. His mind had already completely fallen into an inexplicably great terror, and as he continued to withstand Xianxia, who got even more courageous as the battle progresses, he bitterly pondered on a way to flee. Up to this point of the battle, his fighting spirit had already been completely depleted, and he wasn't willing to continue tangling with this freak, Xianxia, any longer. Even to the extent that he suspected that if it were to continue like this, he would be exhausted to death by Xianxia. What should I do? Should I lower my head and admit defeat to him? It's of no use. Even if I admit defeat, I'm afraid this fellow wouldn't let me off. His grandfather died in the hands of my Li clan's cultivators after all. This enmity is absolutely irreconcilable, and he would absolutely not forgive me. But, besides admitting defeat, what other method is able to allow me to survive? Li Huai felt the true essence that had reduced within his dantian, and he seemed to see the footsteps of the god of death silently approaching. For a moment, his heart burned with anxiety, and an extremely short absent-mindedness appeared in his expression. It was right at this moment that Xianxia's eyes lit up. He grabbed onto this chance that was difficult to come by and took a step forward. Then his right fist swung out like a whip, passing through the cracks between the sword shadows before directly smashing onto Li Huai's chest with a bang. Kacha! Kacha! A wave of sounds of bones breaking that caused one's scalp to go numb echoed out, and Li Huai's chest abruptly sunk to become a cavity. The terrifying strength that surged out from the fist had instantly shattered the bones in his chest, and his internal organs were shattered into countless pieces as well. Pooh! Li Huai spat out a mouthful of dense and dark red blood, and his face instantly went white as a sheet. He gazed at Xianxia with a look that carried along a trace of shock, resentment, frustrations, and was extremely complicated. I never imagined that a jinx like you actually had become so formidable. It's truly ironic. Li Huai spoke disjointedly, and as soon as he finished speaking, his head turned sideways and he died on the spot. I originally intended to kill everyone in your Li clan before your eyes, but now it seems that I've let you off lightly. Xianxia muttered. Then he picked up the pine ripple sword that was still held in Li Huai's hand. He couldn't care less to give this fellow's corpse another glance, and he turned around to walk towards the gold-souled divine lotus. Pine Mist City, Li Clan, Ancestral House. Allegedly, the Ancestral House contained the most superb cultivation techniques that had been passed down by the Li clan's ancestors until the current day and the various spirit pills used for cultivation. At the same time, the Ancestral House contained various training sessions that were extremely brutal and were able to torture one to the point they were covered in bruises, and living was worse off than death. However, in the heart of all the Li clan disciples, the Ancestral House was still the sacred grounds of cultivation that they desired the most in their hearts. So long as they were able to become stronger, what was suffering little hardships and enduring a little pain? Unfortunately, the Ancestral House was the vital center of the Li clan. Besides direct disciples or disciples with extremely outstanding natural talent, others had no hope of taking a step into the Ancestral House within their lifetimes. Today, the door of the Ancestral House that had been tightly closed for many months slowly opened. Step, step, step. A wave of steady and forceful footsteps resounded out on the deep and quiet walkway of the Ancestral House, and after a short moment, a young man walked out from the darkness. It was shockingly Li Ming, the youngest son of the Li clan patriarch Li Yizhen. However, he was a completely different person when compared to before. His clothes were slovenly. His hair was disheveled hair and he had an unkempt appearance, seeming to have not bathed for a few months. His white skin was rough and dark, and his originally puffy and frivolous triangular eyes had already become gloomy and sharp like a hawk now, shining brightly. So it turns out that the feeling of possessing strength is actually so wonderful. He clenched his fist. His palms that used to be white were now completely filled with calluses and the bones in his hand had become big and thick. When he clenched his fist tightly, a vicious and fierce aura abruptly surged out from his body. Second young master, the patriarch has asked to see you. Iron Hand, who was enveloped in a ball of dark shadows, walked out from the darkness, and his sharp and gloomy voice was like a venomous snake flicking its tongue while concealed in the shadows. Uncle Iron Hand, please lead the way, Li Ming said respectfully. At this moment, when he possessed strength, he finally understood how terrifying the cultivation of Iron Hand, who was willing to be a shadow and follow by his father's side all the time, was. Li clan main hall. Li Yizhen sat up straight in the center position, and on both of his sides were the numerous elders of the Li clan. Everyone's gazes descended onto Li Ming in unison when they saw him enter. Li Ming was able to feel the shock and disbelief within these gazes, and this feeling was extremely wonderful. It felt extremely enjoyable to him, yet his expression was composed and his pace was unhurried. After cupping his hands in greetings, he silently sat on the seat that belonged to him. 3 months of time, attaining the perfection stage of the congenital realm from the postnatal realm. Not bad, not bad. The Grand Elder, Li Fengtu, spoke first. His expression revealed happiness as he said with a smile. Now, Li Huai has already followed Miss Su to enter the southern barbaric nether domain for a month. He's probably already found the Sword Immortal's abode at this moment. It couldn't be any better if he's able to obtain some of the good luck within. Yizhen, you've brought 2 good sons into the world. Grand Elder, you're too kind. Li Yizhen was extremely happy from obtaining the praise of the Grand Elder. Li Fengtu smiled, then his expression went serious as he said in a serious tone. I've actually gathered everyone here today for an extremely simple matter. That is to decide on the person that will inherit our Li clan. Although Li Ming isn't bad, he's slightly young after all, and there's quite a gap with Li Huai. I suggest Li Huai inherits the position of our Li clan's patriarch. What does everyone think? Grand Elder, your discerning eyes are like torches in the dark. Li Huai is indeed not bad, as his natural talent and mentality are outstanding amongst his peers as well. Yes, I agree to Li Huai inheriting the position of patriarch. Haha. Of course, it should be Li Huai. After he returns from the southern barbaric nether domain this time, he might have already captured Miss Su's heart and helped to bring about the connection between our Li clan and the Su clan through marriage. In this way, wouldn't the status of our Li clan rise as well? All the elders agreed to Li Fengtu's opinion. Li Ming, who quietly sat at the side, felt extreme discomfort in his heart when he saw this. If it was in the past, he wouldn't fuss about all this at all. because he was too weak and was utterly unable to compare to Li Huai, who was like a favored genius of the gods. But it was different now. He already possessed formidable strength. Although he was still inferior to Li Huai, who could be sure that he wouldn't surpass Li Huai in the future? Since everyone has agreed on Li Huai, then, Grand Elder Li Fengtu hadn't finished speaking when the door of the main hall was suddenly pushed open rudely. Manager Wu had an expression of terror as he dashed in with a stagger, then knelt on the ground before shouting out loudly, "Patriarch, elders, it's a disaster. Young Master Li Huai's soul vitality lamp has extinguished." Kacha! The teacup in Li Yizhen's hand dropped onto the ground and shattered into a pile of powder. Li Huai is actually dead? Everyone's face went extremely gloomy, and for a time, the atmosphere within the main hall became extremely dreary. They'd convened a clan meeting this time to confirm Li Huai's status as the next patriarch. However, the results weren't even announced yet when they were notified of the news of Li Huai's death. Who could accept this sort of sudden change? Could it be that an accident occurred within the southern barbaric nether domain? How could it be possible? Li Huai was following along with Miss Su. Allegedly, there are still a few more disciples from the great powers of Dragon Lake City with them. How could he encounter a disaster? God damn it! If I find out who killed my son, Huai, I'll surely annihilate his entire clan. After a short period of silence, enraged cries blasted out to resound within the main hall. "Shut up!" Li Fengtu shouted out explosively, and when he saw everyone had shut their mouths, he said coldly, "Everyone knows that the southern barbaric nether domain trials are only for a month's time. After 1 month, all the cultivators within it would be teleported out, and only the people that have entered the Sword Immortal's abode will be able to continue staying with the southern barbaric nether domain. The next time the southern barbaric nether domain opens is 3 years from now, so even if we're filled with even more resentment, we won't be able to see the culprit for another 3 years. Then, is there any meaning in discussing this matter now? Grand Elder, what you mean is?" Li Yizhen forcefully endured the sorrow from losing his son, and his voice was low and hoarse. "The pressing matter at the moment is to choose the person who'll inherit the position of patriarch in the clan. Since Li Huai is gone, then it'll be changed to be assumed by Li Ming." Li Fengtu took a deep breath and said word for word, "Everyone, losing a clan member is nothing. What's important is that all of us can't only be drowned in grief, and aggrieve those near to us and gladden the enemy." "Yes." Everyone's faces went solemn as they agreed in unison. Li Ming was in slight disbelief as he gazed at everything that happened before his eyes. I've so easily become the one to inherit the place of patriarch? He was far from being sad or happy about the death of Li Huai because he'd lived beneath Li Huai's shadow since he was young. So the relationship between the two brothers wasn't that good. But when he thought of how he'd become the one to inherit the place of patriarch because of Li Huai's death, he felt as if he'd eaten a fly in his heart. He felt awfully disgusted. "This isn't what I wanted." Li Ming roared in his heart. "I already possess strength and I'm not inferior to Li Huai. The day will come when I prove it to all of you." "Li Ming!" The Grand Elder's voice sounded out by his ears, and Li Ming awoke from his chaotic thoughts. Then he stood up and cupped his hands. "Grand Elder, don't think that just because you've been chosen to inherit the place of the patriarch that you'll surely be able to obtain it. You have to use your strength to prove yourself for all the members of the clan to see. Only by obtaining the acknowledgement of everyone would you be able to become a qualified patriarch," the Grand Elder said in a deep voice. Li Ming's gaze swept past his father and the numerous elders, and lofty sentiments surged within his head as he said clearly, "Father elders, I will surely live up to your expectations." As he spoke up to hear, Li Ming pondered for a short moment, then gritted his teeth and continued, "Brother is gone. Then from today onwards, I've decided to replace him in not only the place of patriarch, but I also want to get married to Miss Su of the Dragon Lake City's Su clan." "Oh, what do you plan to do?" A trace of a curious light flashed within Li Fengtu's eyes. "Since the Su clan has agreed that so long as we humiliate Xianxia's family to death, they would betroth Miss Su to my Li clan. I'll start from here." Li Ming replied without hesitation. Of course, Li Huai has always been conducting this plan. But please be at ease, Grand Elder. I'll be even crueler and better than my brother. So long as they're related to Xianxia's family, then I won't let any of them off. Do you have a target? Li Fengtu continued to question. Yes. The boss of the Pine Mist City's Zhang General Store, all the talisman crafting apprentices under him, and all the neighbors within an area of 300 m from Xianxia's house. A trace of madness flashed within Li Ming's eyes. I want them all dead. Annihilated. I want to tell everyone in Pine Mist City that they died because of Xianxia. I want everyone to know that even if they have the slightest bit of relationship with Xianxia, then they're bound to face death and destruction. What an atrocious and extreme disposition. The numerous elders present gasped inwardly, and their gazes when they looked at Li Ming couldn't help but carry along a trace of worry. Is such temper suitable to inherit the place of patriarch? Good. Grand Elder Li Fengtu was silent for a long time, yet he unexpectedly clapped and praised. Losers are always in the wrong, and only the strong are respected. So long as it's beneficial to my Li clan, it's still worth it even if your methods are 100 times more atrocious. Li Ming was anxious and fearful after he finished speaking of his plan. At this moment, he couldn't help but be extremely happy from suddenly obtaining the acknowledgement of the Grand Elder, and he cupped his hands and said, Please don't worry, Grand Elder. It isn't merely for the sake of the marriage with Su Jiao. It's also for the sake of our Li clan's strengthening and expansion in the future. I'll surely deal with Xianxia until the Su clan is satisfied. As he spoke, a trace of regret couldn't help but arise in Li Ming's heart. Unfortunately, that kid, Chun Hao, has already left Pine Mist City. Otherwise, I'd let him see his brother, Xianxia, slowly get tortured and humiliated by me until death. Only that would be enjoyable. According to my knowledge, Xianxia has followed Du Qingxi to enter the Sword Immortal's abode, and he probably won't appear within the next 3 years. This period of time is sufficient to do anything. Li Ming, do you understand what I mean? Li Fengtu asked. Li Ming nodded. Li Fengtu said in a deep voice, Go, if you're able to take care of this matter beautifully and make the Su clan satisfied. Then with my status as Grand Elder, I'll guarantee that the patriarch of our Li clan will surely be you. Yes. Li Ming took a deep breath, then turned around and left. He knew that this was a test to him, and at the same time, it was the best opportunity for him to change his destiny. 100 Herb Hall, it isn't time yet, wait a while. It ought to take another incense stick's worth of time more before this gold soul lotus fruit will mature and drop. You have to use your true essence and absorb it into your dantian before it touches the ground. After annihilating Li Huai, Ji Yu had appeared once again, and he pointed at the gold soul divine lotus as he spoke confidently. You'll be able to use this gold soul lotus fruit once you've cultivated your soul to the stage of divine sense. Divine sense? According to Xianxia's knowledge, not mentioning those heaven-defying geniuses, ordinary Violet Palace realm cultivators possessed perception force, Golden Hall realm cultivators possessed spiritual perception, Golden Core realm cultivators possessed divine perception, and only Rebirth realm cultivators possessed divine sense. Because of possessing the Fuxi divine status within his sea of consciousness, Xianxia was naturally not within the ordinary ranks. Although he was only at the perfection stage of the congenital realm, his soul had already condensed perception force, and it was completely capable of matching ordinary Violet Palace realm cultivators. Xianxia said curiously, What miraculous effect does the gold soul lotus fruit actually possess? Could it be that it's a treasure that benefits the strength of the soul? Ji Yu instead avoided the question and didn't answer and only said, It's of no use if you know now. It's better if you keep your mind on cultivating. Advancing the strength of your soul is what you need to do now. Xianxia was helpless. I know too little? Who can I resent for that? Oh, you can't waste the spirit spring as well. Seize this opportunity to gather some spirit liquid. According to my estimation, at the instant the gold soul lotus fruit matures, it will completely absorb all the nearby spirit energy. At that time, you'll be unable to obtain anything. Ji Yu glanced at the spirit spring and reminded. At this moment, She suddenly realized that having the spirit of the manor that has existed for 1,000,000 years by his side was truly a joyful thing. If Jiyu wasn't here, he might have pulled out the gold soul divine lotus by the roots and taken it away by now, and it would be completely impossible for him to know that when the gold soul lotus fruit matured, it would actually completely absorb all the nearby spirit energy. She took out the octagonal containment bottle from his storage ring and started to squat beside the spirit spring to gather the spirit liquid. The insides of this octagonal containment bottle was divided into 8 enormous spaces. One of them contained the nearly 250 kilograms of liquid condensed from Netherreason baleful chi. Another 7 empty space still remained within, and in total it was sufficient to contain more than 500,000 kilograms of liquids. Unfortunately, I only have the time of 1 incense stick. Once this gold soul lotus fruit matures, the spirit spring will dry up with it. If I knew this earlier, I would have started gathering the spirit liquid since the beginning. She said regretfully in his heart. According to the speed the spirit liquid poured out from the spirit spring, it would be quite good if he was able to gather 5,000 kilograms of spirit liquid before the gold soul lotus fruit matured. Infant Pitio, gold soul divine lotus. Although this immortal nether enlightenment is only a fallen immortal, his ability is extremely shocking. He was actually able to find such divine items. In his time, he was probably someone with great karmic luck. Jiyu looked at the gold soul divine lotus and seemed to speak from feelings as he sighed with emotion. Unfortunately, it's all benefited you now. In terms of the strength of karmic luck, then this immortal nether enlightenment is still inferior to you. She was stunned, then shook his head and said, "How could that be possible? Everyone calls me Jinx in Pine Mist City. A man cannot be without arrogance. There's no need to look down on yourself." Jiyu said in disdain, "The people who said you're a Jinx are a group of idiots. If you're a Jinx, then would you be able to obtain the true body brand of my master? Would you be able to walk out of the star secret realm? In the future, so long as you unceasingly work hard in your cultivations, then so long as no accidents happen, you're completely able to pass through all the trials in the heaven peak of trials and inherit the mantle of my master to become an unequaled expert in your time." As he spoke up to hear, Jiyu stared fixedly at Shi and asked, "Now, do you still think you're a Jinx?" "No, Shi shook his head decisively. What Jiyu said was indeed the truth. If he still denied it, then he would be acting. Jiyu said in praise, "Of course not. Moreover, you possess an infant Pitio by your side now. Your karmic luck will only become better." She was praised to the point he blushed slightly, and he was just intending to change the topic when he suddenly thought of something. Half an hour had already passed, and the chaotic battle between Chai Letian and Su Jiao had probably already finished. Shi's heart couldn't help but constrict at the instant this thought emerged in his mind. At this moment, he didn't think about how to sneak attack Chai Letian anymore. So long as Chai Letian didn't die, he could go kill Chai Letian at any time. But the time the gold soul lotus fruit drops to the ground was only an instant. Comparatively speaking, the gold soul lotus fruit before him was still more important. "Get ready. It's about to mature." Jiyu's voice abruptly exploded out by his ears. She didn't dare let his mind wander anymore, and he poured his true essence into his palms, as he stared fixedly at the gold soul divine lotus without batting an eyelid. Under the cover of the strands and threads of pistils and stamens, the infant fist-sized golden fruit seemed to be breathing, and circles of dense golden ripples appeared on its surface. Splash! Splash! A pillar of water that was like a waterfall suddenly shot out from within the nearby spirit spring and surged straight towards the gold soul lotus fruit. All the spirit energy within the 100-herb hall was like sharks that had smelt blood and madly surged towards the gold soul lotus fruit. Whereas the golden fruit was like a bottomless pit, accepting all the spirit energy that was nearby. As the amount of spirit energy it had absorbed increased, the golden light on its surface grew denser and more eye-piercing, seeming to be like a small sun. Bang! 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 Seeming to have activated something, the entire 100-herb hall abruptly started to sway violently, and layers of transparent waves rippled out in the air surrounding the gold soul divine lotus, and the air seemed as if it would shatter in the next moment. At the same time, An inexplicable, terrifying, oppressive force invaded the hall from every direction, and Xianxia, who was beside the gold-soul divine lotus, felt it even more strongly. It felt as if his throat was choked, causing him to feel suffocated and nearly be unable to control the true essence that was restless within his body. What a terrifying, strange phenomenon. I heard that as long as a spirit treasure emerged into the world, it would surely be accompanied by various strange phenomenon. Although I don't know what miraculous effect this gold-soul divine lotus possesses, it's obviously an extremely mystical existence. Even though the boundless oppressive force suppressed him to the point it was difficult to breathe, but Xianxi's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and his nerves were strained to the limit. Roar! A clear and melodious sound that was like the roar of a dragon sounded out. From a low sound that was inaudible, it gradually became loud and resonant, and in the end, it transformed into a billowing wave of music that vibrated in every corner of the 100-herb hall. Right at this moment, the stem, branches, and petals of Gold Soul Divine Lotus burnt into nothingness at a noticeable speed, and the Gold Soul Lotus fruit covered within the pistil and stamens lightly shook. Then it fell. Whoosh! Practically the instant the Gold Soul Lotus fruit dropped, the true essence that Xianxia had kept ready in his palm since a long time ago transformed into a ray of light that was like a waterfall, and it instantly enveloped the Gold Soul Lotus fruit before being swallowed by Xianxia into his dantian. His actions were so swift that his was almost completely in an instant, as if he'd practiced it countless times earlier. Success. Xianxia was slightly unable to believe it, but when he felt the Gold Soul Lotus fruit that quietly floated within his dantian, he finally believed that he'd indeed succeeded. At this moment, within his dantian, 9 clouds that were condensed from true essence formed a ladder that went upwards layer by layer, whereas at the bottommost area of his dantian, the Gold Soul Lotus fruit quietly floated there. The surface of the lotus fruit ceaselessly emitted strands and threads of golden light, and the entire scene of it within his dantian seemed extremely harmonious, without any abnormalities. This also allowed Xianxia to be much more at ease. Thump, thump, thump. The 100-herb hall swayed more furiously by the moment, and piece after piece of enormous rocks that were an entire 300 m long collapsed from above. It seemed as if spider webs had formed on the surrounding walls as they fell off and shattered, causing ash and dust to billow in the air, and countless deep trenches that were continuous and had no end had split open on the ground. It's as expected. The Gold Soul Divine Lotus was the point the spirit energy within this entire hall gathered, and at the same time it maintained the balance in the entire hall. At this moment, the Gold Soul Divine Lotus has withered away and the spirit energy has completely dried up as well. So, the entire hall has lost its support and will surely collapse. Jiyu swept his gaze at the surroundings, then said swiftly, "Leave! Quickly!" At the same time that Jiyu spoke, Xianxia had already perceived a hint of trouble. At this moment, he didn't dare hesitate and picked up the octagonal containment bottle on the floor before violently dashing out of the hall. Bang! At the instant he exited the hall, the 100-herb hall behind Xianxia that covered an area of 500 kilometers collapsed with a bang. For a moment, enormous rocks flew into the air and dust soared into the sky. The stream of air that was emitted from the collapse was like a whistling hurricane, and it scraped Xianxi's face to the point it hurt. "Xianxia!" A voice that was chilly like ice suddenly sounded out. Xianxia looked over and saw to his surprise that Chai Lishan's group, including Du Qingxi, Duanmuze, and Song Lin, stood 300 m in the distance. The only people that were missing from the group were the pair of twins, Du Quan and Du Kue, of Windsor Institution. Moreover, exhaustion that was difficult to disguise filled the space between their brows, and their clothes were stained with patches of blood. It was a wonder if the blood was their own or their enemies. When he saw this scene, Xianxia understood that the chaotic battle within the book reserve hall had already ended. If he wasn't wrong, Du Kue and Du Quan would have surely lost their lives in the chaotic battle. However, Xianxia didn't pay any attention to all this, as the fact that Du Qingxi, Duanmuze, and Song Lin were still alive caused his mood to be much more cheerful. "It's good that you're fine." At this moment, Du Qingxi was looking over here with a complicated gaze that seemed furious, disappointed, and so on and so forth. Chun, she couldn't help but be stunned. Is she silently blaming me? Duanmu was unable to refrain himself in the end, and he said harshly, Chun-Shi, why did you do that to us? To think that I took you to be a brother. Yet I never expected that you'd be so cold and heartless. The nearby Song Lin shook his head as well, yet didn't say anything. I'm cold and heartless? A wisp of rage surged out from the bottom of Chun-Shi's heart, and he pointed at Chai Letian as he asked, Since you took me to be a brother, then why didn't you stand up for me when he threw me down the chasm that day? Not only that, you're still following by his side all this time. Let me ask you, what right do you have to say this? Duanmu's expression froze and was speechless. Whereas when Du Qingxi and Song Lin heard what Chun-Shi said, their expression became unnatural as well. I know that there's a nether transformation realm ancestor behind this Chai fellow, and you don't dare offend him due to consideration for your clans. I can understand all this. But who will understand me? Could it be that just because my identity is inferior to everyone else, you don't have to care about my feelings at all? Besides that, I only spoke a single sentence and was utterly unsure if it would be able to cause a chaotic battle, and the reason I did so was extremely simple as well. It was for the sake of seizing the opportunity to kill Chai Letian. You call me cold and heartless just because of this. At this moment, Chun-Shi seemed unusually agitated and was virtually a different person compared to his usually reserved self. But this also showed one thing. No matter if Chun-Shi admitted it or not, in his heart, he'd already taken Du Qingxi's group of 3 as his friends. He was insulted as a jinx since a young age, and practically no one of the same age took him to be a friend. Du Qingxi's group was the first group of friends he'd obtained in his 16 years of life. Even though they were only ordinary friends and weren't to the extent of being able to bear open their hearts to each other, he still cherished this piece of friendship extremely. It was precisely because of this that Chun-Shi would become so agitated. Du Qingxi's group of 3 were silent and speechless, as what Chun-Shi said caused them to be unable to arouse the desire to provide any explanation. This was the truth, and they were unable to deny it. Chun-Shi and Duanmu didn't hide anything as they spoke, and used an almost straightforward way to vent the dissatisfaction within their hearts. Thus, this attitude of facing each other straightforwardly seemed rare and precious. But, when their conversation entered the ears of the others, it was instead as if they'd heard an extremely great joke. On one side was a disciple from an impoverished family who'd been poverty-stricken and in very poor circumstances since a young age, and was even the jinx of Pine Mist City that was well known in every household. On the other side was the favored genius from one of the 6 great clans of Dragon Lake City, who possessed a lofty and respected status. Regardless of status or identity, and even cultivation, there was an insurmountable gap between these two people. How could they become friends? In the cultivation world where status was ranked by endowment, if this wasn't a joke, then what was? In the eyes of Chai Letian and the others, the current Chun-Shi was undoubtedly talking nonsense like a pitiable idiot. He's truly like an idiot. Fortunately, my father tore apart our marriage contract that year. It was at this moment that Su Jiao's voice slowly sounded out from the other side. Chun-Shi's mood was agitated, and he actually only noticed at this moment that Su Jiao's group stood 300 m in the distance on the other side. Similar to Chai Lishan's group, Su Jiao's group all had clothes tainted with blood and exhausted expressions. Moreover, only 9 people remained within their group that originally consisted of 13 people. Their losses were actually more disastrous than Chai Lishan's group. Chun-Shi felt a chilly sensation in his heart, and the flames of rage in his chest instantly subsided. His gaze scanned the surroundings, but he didn't notice any traces of the people from Phoenix Cloud's sect. Could it be they all died in the chaotic battle? Chun-Shi was slightly unable to believe it, but when he pondered about it for a moment, this was also the inference that was the closest to the truth. After all, the Phoenix Cloud Sect's group was formed from disciples of small powers in the Southern Territory. Although they had Violet Palace realm cultivations, they were obviously unable to compare to Su Jiao and Chai Lishan's groups that were from the ancient and great powers of Dragon Lake City. Miss Su, the culprit that caused our groups to suffer disastrous losses, is standing before us. Are you going to do it? Or should I? Chai Letian said in an unhurried manner. The chaotic battle in the book reserve hall was caused by this kid. Now the complete collapse of the 100 Herb Hall seems to be caused by this kid as well. Not only might there be numerous jade slips stored in his possession, moreover, there would also be the treasures of nature he'd obtained from the 100 Herb Hall. If you don't make a move, then I'll strike first and reap the benefits from him. Humph! As if you'd be so kind. Su Jiao grunted coldly, yet she thought in her heart. The treasures within the treasure hall wouldn't have been cleaned out by this fellow as well, right? If it's like this, then I really can't allow Chai Letian to seize the initiative. Chai Letian roared with laughter. Ha ha! A straightforward person doesn't resort to beating around the bush. I have conditions, of course. I'm all ears. Su Jiao frowned. Chai Letian said without hesitation. My conditions are the things in this kid's possession. We'll split it 50-50. Could be said that this condition couldn't be better. After they'd experienced the chaotic battle from before, they had an even deeper understanding of each other's strengths after all. If they were to get into battle because of the things in Xianxia's possession, then the price they paid would be too high, and it was extremely not worthwhile. Whereas at this moment, Chai Letian had obviously understood this, so he put forward this suggestion. However, Su Jiao still felt slightly uneasy. According to her knowledge, Chai Lishan's possessive desires were extremely strong and wasn't someone so easy to deal with. It was rather unbelievable that he was able to put forward such a suggestion. All right, I agree. After thinking it over again and again, Su Jiao still decided to give it a try. It was at this moment that Xianxia, who was watching on coldly all along, spoke out abruptly. If I'm not wrong, then after the chaotic battle earlier, all of you are surely injured as well. Even if all of you aren't injured, your physical strength and true essence would surely have been almost completely exhausted. Minute changes appeared on the expressions of everyone behind Chai Letian and Su Jiao when they heard this. Xianxia noticed this and was even surer of the deduction in his heart, and he spoke once again. I killed Li Huai in the 100 Herb Hall earlier. If all of you think that you're able to defeat me in your current conditions, then feel free to come at me. Killed Li Huai? Su Jiao's expression suddenly sank. When they entered the book reserve hall, Li Huai had silently left according to her wishes and headed to the 100 Herb Hall. So he wasn't swept into the chaotic battle earlier, and his strength was in peak condition and would only surpass her current condition. If it was really like Xianxia had said, and Li Huai had died miserably at his hands, then wouldn't it mean that it would be impossible for everyone present to be a match for Xianxia? Clang! Xianxia casually tossed Li Huai's pine ripple sword on the floor, yet didn't explain any further, because the truth was always more convincing than words. As expected, when she saw the pine ripple sword on the floor, Su Jiao was unable to maintain her composure any longer and cried out involuntarily. How can this be possible? After entering the Sword Immortal's abode, Li Huai's strength wasn't restricted any longer. With his Violet Palace realm cultivation, how could he have been killed by Xianxia? It's actually true. In the distance, Chai Lishan's pupils constricted and various thoughts arose within his heart. With my current strength, I'm completely capable of taking Xianxia down if I go all out, but doing this is too dangerous. Not to mention Su Jiao's group are still glaring covetously from nearby. What should I do if they seize the opportunity to attack me mercilessly while I'm fighting Xianxia? Grouping up and attacking him is impossible as well. If we force Xianxia into a corner, he would surely cause a certain amount of injury to my group while struggling desperately. Whereas Su Jiao's group were completely capable of waiting to reap the benefits. Most worrying of all, Du Qingxi's group of 3 obviously have an extraordinary relationship with Xianxia. If they were to jump out and fight together with Xianxia now, wouldn't I only be left with 3 people? Then we would become the weakest group and in a precarious situation. Numerous thoughts flashed past Chai Lishan's mind, and Chai Lishan's expression had already become incomparably gloomy. Up to this point, Chai Letian had to admit that Xianxia was an extremely formidable opponent. The resoluteness and viciousness of Xianxia's mind, Xianxia's grasp of the situation that was meticulous in every possible way, and Xianxia's careful scheming that took every conceivable possibility into account, caused Chai Letian to be extremely fearful of Xianxia. If this kid wasn't taken care of as soon as possible, then he will surely become a great calamity in the future. Without any reason or rhyme, an extremely preposterous thought arose within Chai Lishan's heart. This won't do. I can't act rashly at this moment, otherwise, I'll surely fall into a situation that is unfavorable to me. Chai Letian had to helplessly accept reality. Because, besides looking on and doing nothing, he'd already lost all ability to deal with Chen Shi. Su Jiao's feelings were almost similar to Chai Letian, and the reason she was afraid was no different from Chai Letian, even to the extent that she understood Chen Shi's strength even better than Chai Letian. She'd once seen the battle between Chen Shi and Li Huai outside Bloodbath City with her own 2 eyes. Despite Chen Shi only possessing a cultivation at the congenital realm, his cultivation in the martial Dao wasn't inferior to a Violet Palace realm cultivation, and even surpassed a Violet Palace realm cultivator. After all, within their current group of people, only Bin was able to cultivate a martial technique to the extent of the unity stage, and even she was unable to accomplish this. Whereas not only did Chen Shi's fist technique attain the unity stage, even his sword technique faintly possessed traces of breaking through to the unity stage. A freak like this couldn't be measured with common sense, and Chen Shi killing Li Huai was sufficient to explain everything. Du Qingshi's group of 3 were naturally able to notice the subtle changes that were occurring in the atmosphere, and enormous changes occurred in the gazes they shot at Chen Shi. Astonishment, shock, bewilderment. They seemed as if it was the first time they'd known Chen Shi, because it was impossible for them to imagine, even if they racked their brains, just relying on a string of words and a sword, Chen Shi was able to turn the entire situation around. This level of ability had already exceeded their imagination, and only producing clouds with a turn of the hand and producing rain with another could describe this. Within this silent atmosphere, Chen Shi lifted his feet and walked towards the distance. His expression was as normal, without the slightest awareness of being under tight encirclement, and he walked in an extremely firm and balanced manner. "Brother Chai, why don't we first kill this fellow together?" Su Jiao's voice was as if forced out from the cracks in her teeth, and the gaze she looked at Chen Shi almost spouted fire. Too arrogant. Could it be that this fellow thinks I can't do anything to him? When he heard her, Chai Letian looked at Du Qingshi's group of 3 and didn't say any more, but the meaning in his gaze couldn't be any clearer. Su Jiao was stunned, then came to an understanding. At this moment, if those 3 people were to jump out and help Chen Shi, it would truly be a cause for a headache. What should I do? Could it be that I have to look on helplessly as this fellow swaggers off? Su Jiao's conflicted mood had already reached an extreme state. In the book Reserve Hall, the chaotic battle of 3 groups was caused because of a single sentence from Chen Shi. At this moment, it was again what he said and the sword he tossed on the floor that caused the 2 groups of people that wished for nothing more than to kill him and rob him. Dare not act rashly. Exactly what sort of freak is this fellow? A trace of complicated feelings that were beyond expression couldn't help but arise within the hearts of everyone. Who? Chen Shi heaved a long sigh of relief when he confirmed that he'd broken away from the range everyone's perception force could lock onto him. And only now did he realize that the clothes on his body had already become completely drenched with cold sweat. Chen Shi could be said to have been caught in a hopeless situation when he was surrounded by Chai Letian and Su Jiao's group earlier, and it was pure luck that he was able to get away safely. There were roughly 2 reasons for this. The first, after experiencing the tragic chaotic battle within the book Reserve Hall, Chai Letian and Su Jiao's groups were already in a state of exhaustion, whereas the fact that Chen Shi was able to easily kill Li Huai, who was at the Violet Palace realm, had undoubtedly caused them to be extremely fearful. The second, Chai Lishan's group and Su Jiao's groups were both suspicious and fearful of each other, and they were worried that the other group would reap the final reward once they made a move against Chen Shi. Of course, there were also various other factors, but comparatively speaking, if it wasn't for Chen Shi acutely perceiving the 2 points above and taking action on them, it would be absolutely impossible for him to leave so easily. Even to the extent that once a minute mistake was to appear in this process, it was possible to cause Chen Shi to fall into eternal doom. Chen Shi didn't ponder over it anymore, nor did he hesitate in the slightest as he started to dash off violently. Along with the passage of time, the strength of Chai Letian and Su Jiao's groups would surely recover gradually. If he was unable to find a safe place to conceal himself during this period of time, then everything would go back to square one. The southern barbaric nether domain was isolated from the rest of the world, and they had to wait for it to open 3 years from now before they would be able to leave. Could be said that if Xianxia wanted to avoid the pursuit of Chai Letian and the others for these 3 years, then he must find a concealed location that no one was able to discover. However, Xianxia felt helpless, as not only was he unable to find a place to conceal himself, he even had no way to leave this Sword Immortal's abode. When we entered the Sword Immortal's abode, we relied on the Nether Enlightenment tokens to use the Trifactor teleportation platform and be teleported in. But what about leaving? There was no path from the Sword Immortal's abode that led to the outside world. Xianxia had already looked through the map of the entire Sword Immortal's abode in the main hall's core area earlier, and he was extremely sure of this. If the southern barbaric nether domain was said to be a small space that was isolated from the rest of the world, then the Sword Immortal's abode was an even smaller space that was established within the southern barbaric nether domain. Besides the Trifactor teleportation formation used to enter here, there wasn't a single other path of access. Troubles truly do not come singly. Xianxia pondered and pondered, and his footsteps had unconsciously dashed towards the main hall. When he was teleported in, he'd appeared within the main hall, and he subconsciously took this place to be his lair. Not long after, Xianxia once again returned to the main hall. As he gazed at the jade bed and the work table within the simple room, Xianxia felt much more at ease, and then he sat cross-legged on the bed and started to rest with closed eyes. Not even half a day had passed since entering the Sword Immortal's abode, but to Xianxia, every moment was extremely breathtaking. Seeking treasures, stirring up a chaotic battle, killing Li Huai, collecting the Gold Soul Divine Lotus, getting away from the tight encirclement, incident after incident, each more dangerous than before. It was like dancing on the edge of a blade, and one wrong move would cause the whole game to be lost. Although Xianxia's physique had already been tempered to be extremely formidable, he still felt the exertion too great to endure. Gradually, the strands of cool and refreshing cold qi that was emitted from the jade bed caused Xianxia's mind to become tranquil and devoid of any distracting thoughts. Within his sea of consciousness, the Fuxi divine statue that emitted an ancient and vast aura was still glowing with a myriad of misty fine lights, and Xianxia's soul sat cross-legged before the divine status with a serene expression. His strained nerves calmed down and his mind and physical strength recovered bit by bit. He completely didn't notice that a black figure that was like mist had suddenly appeared within the jade bed under his butt. Whoosh! Xianxia's body froze, and he felt as if there was something else within his body, and it was surging towards his sea of consciousness at an extremely swift pace. What's going on? Xianxia quickly opened his eyes. However, before he could wrap his head around the matter, he felt a loud echo out in his mind. Then a sharp and hoarse voice resounded out with a rumble. Hoo. I've waited for 10,000 years, and I, Nether Enlightenment, have finally awaited for a superb body. The heavens didn't disappoint me after all. Along with the voice, a black figure swiftly appeared within Xianxia's sea of consciousness. The black figure's face was gaunt and pale with sunken eye sockets, yet his eyes were long and thin like the edge of a sword, and they were extremely bright. Ha. So long as I possess this body, I'll be able to cultivate once again. With the infant Pishio and Gold Soul Divine Lotus in my possession, why should I worry about being unable to overcome the damned 9th level of the heavenly tribulation? Within his sea of consciousness, Xianxia swiftly stood up and gazed at the black-clothed person that seemed as if he'd appeared out of thin air, then shouted loudly, Nether Enlightenment? Exactly. Kid, I presume you coveted the treasures stored within my abode, so you relied on the Nether Enlightenment token to enter, right? Ha. Too bad. Your soul is about to be devoured by me, and your body will become mine. As expected, the figure that was like black mist was shockingly the soul of the immortal Nether Enlightenment. Xianxia's expression remained unfazed as he asked coldly, All this was a trap you devised beforehand? Of course. Did you think I left this immortal estate behind and sent my Nether Enlightenment tokens into the outside world for the sake of allowing all of you to divide up my treasures? Nether Enlightenment gazed at Xianxia with a gaze of pity, and a wisp of burning greed surged out from his eyes that were long and thin like a blade. Kid, obediently allow me to devour your soul. Your body being able to be used by me is an extremely great fortune you can't obtain in your entire lifetime. Humph. Even if you devour my soul, your cultivation would only be at the congenital realm. How would you be able to leave this place? Numerous enemies that wish for nothing more than to kill me are concealed outside. Chun, she said loudly. Kid, put away your little tricks. Don't you just want to know how to leave this immortal estate? Nether Enlightenment glanced at Xianxia in disdain. Then he sneered. I can tell you since you're about to die, but... As he spoke up to hear, killing intent flashed within Nether Enlightenment's eyes. Then he abruptly flashed out explosively, transforming into a ball of billowing black mist as he enveloped towards Xianxia. But, I'll only tell you after I devour your soul. Ha ha ha. As he gazed at Xianxia, who was obviously frightened by him to the point he dared not move. Nether Enlightenment's complacent roars of laughter echoed out from within the billowing black mist. Since you're unwilling to tell me, then die. When the black mist Nether Enlightenment had transformed to was about to envelop Xianxia, who stared blankly on the spot without moving, suddenly shot out a strand of a cold light that was dazzling and bright from his eyes. OM. A cold sound of chanting that seemed to have come from ancient times resounded within his sea of consciousness. Then an enormous figure of a thin old man appeared out of thin air within his sea of consciousness. The old man was barefooted and wore linen clothes, and sat cross-legged in the air just like that, seeming like a towering mountain that couldn't be worn away even after experiencing countless years of time. His gaze was deep and vast, and myriads of divine lights enveloped his body. At the instant he appeared, he'd lit up Xianxia's entire sea of consciousness. Hiss! 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 The black mist that the immortal Nether Enlightenment transformed to melted like ice in water at the instant it was enveloped by the myriad of fine lights from the Fuxi divine statue, and he slowly withered away bit by bit at a speed that was noticeable by the eye. Ah! How could this be possible? It's actually a true body brand left behind by an almighty figure from the primordial era. Nether Enlightenment's voice revealed boundless terror as he screamed miserably. No! In practically an instant, the black mist was burnt into nothingness within the myriad of fine lights, and the voice of Nether Enlightenment before his death still lingered within Xianxia's sea of consciousness. Xianxia started gasping for breath after he was sure that the immortal Nether Enlightenment was completely dead. Even though what he faced earlier was merely a strand of Nether Enlightenment's soul, Xianxia still felt boundless pressure. That was the gap in realms, and it caused him to be nearly unable to arouse the desire to resist. Fortunately, I possessed the true body brand left behind by Senior Fuxi. I obviously made the right gamble this time. If it wasn't for this, I'm afraid it would be absolutely difficult for me to escape this disaster. She had a lingering fear in his heart as he thought about everything that had happened earlier, and boundless gratitude arose in his heart as he gazed upon the ancient divine status in his sea of consciousness that remained the same eternally. Rumble. It was at this moment that an enormous bang that was like muffled thunder from the highest reaches of the heavens echoed out, and the entire main hall shook violently as if there was an earthquake. Could it be that this main hall is about to collapse like the 100 Herb Hall? Xianxia hurriedly stood up and swiftly dashed out. However, to his astonishment, regardless of where he went, the violent shaking like an earthquake remained. Treasure Hall, Book Reserve Hall. All the buildings within the Sword Immortal's abode were like volcanoes that were in deep sleep for 1,000 years, and at this moment, they'd awoken and erupted. What's going on? Flee quickly. This Sword Immortal's abode is about to be destroyed. Let's go. At this moment, no matter was it Chai Lishan's group or Su Jiao's group, their faces all went pale. They didn't dare hesitate any longer, swiftly flying back and forth between the numerous buildings that were crashing down with a bang as they desperately fled for their lives in panic. Outside the Sword Immortal's abode, the southern barbaric nether domain's dusty nightmare area, Sanguinary Mountain, Crimson Flame Mountain Range, they were as if being slapped wantonly by the hands of gods, and numerous enormous rifts that were frightening had split open on the ground and spread throughout the entire southern barbaric nether domain. The baleful beasts were fleeing, They who didn't possess a shred of intelligence were under the influence of their instinct to live, and they fled disorderly in terror and panic. However, no matter where they ran, in the end, they would be devoured by the enormous rifts in the ground. Kacha! Kacha! The surrounding space seemed to be unable to endure this sort of pressure and shattered into numerous pitch-black rifts. At the instant the bits and pieces of rocks and stone dropped into the pitch-black rifts, they silently vanished. At this moment, it was as if doomsday had arrived in the entire southern barbaric nether domain. The ground quaked and space shattered, as if everything would be completely destroyed in the next moment. Deep within the southern barbaric mountain range, a violet-robed handsome young man stood atop a cliff, and he raised his eyes to gaze at the space where the southern barbaric nether domain resided. He had a tall figure and an unusually handsome face. His gaze was deep like a lake, and two balls of violet lightning seemed to be revolving within his pupils. The afterglow of the setting sun that was like blood shone on his face and added on a strange and mysterious aura to him. Interesting, the wasteland within the spatial tear is about to be destroyed? The gaze of the violet-robed handsome young man seemed to be able to pass through all the barriers in space and allow him to see some scenes that ordinary people were unable to see. Oh, there are actually people who haven't come out? I've killed too much these few days, even though they're only some animals. But the old man will surely scold me to death if he finds out. All right, I'll just take it as doing some good deeds to accumulate some virtue. The violet-robed young man stroked his chin and pondered for a short moment. Then he stretched out his hand to grab towards the space that the southern barbaric nether domain resided in.